Mastering Lightning from Hogwarts. Chapter 1. Anjuin and Superpowers. Early July 1980, London, England. It was past 8 p.m., and in the Ellen's Church orphanage, a light still flickered faintly in one of the rooms. Ugh, I can't stand it. The young boy in the room looked at his reflection in the mirror on the wardrobe, constantly stroking his chin, and then occasionally reaching out, his slender but well-defined hands opening and closing as if grasping at something in the void. 11 years. It had been 11 years since he came to this broken world, and he was still in an orphanage in the 80s. No computer, no cell phone. It was hard to imagine how he had survived. Anjuin, boss, the stuff you wanted. Before the boy could finish his sigh, he was startled by a loud knock on the door. What's with all the yelling? Aren't you afraid of being discovered so late? Anjuin opened the door, frowning. Sorry, it's just that carrying this big box of stuff really tired me out, a young man who looked to be 16 or 17 years old said. His shirt wasn't old, but it was wrinkled, and the suspendered trousers were quite fitting. His hair was messy and unkempt. The young man delivering the items to Anjuin was named William, a few years older than Anjuin and also an orphan from the same orphanage. All right, why are you back so late? Did those guys from the North District cause you trouble again? Anjuin frowned slightly, asking in confusion. How could they? Ever since you taught those hoodlums in the North District a lesson last time, no one has come looking for trouble. Today, the brothers managed to get a lot of good stuff, so it took longer. William finished speaking, reached into his pocket, and handed over a few banknotes. Here, this is your share for the week. Anjuin didn't say anything, calmly taking the money. All right, you worked hard today, he said, and was about to open the box when he noticed William was still standing beside him, grinning and wringing his hands without moving. What's wrong? I still need to practice my skills. It's like this, since it's still early anyway, we were thinking of relaxing a bit. All right, you want to play mahjong, right? Anjuin interrupted William, not saying much, and silently walked to the bedside, pulling out a wooden box from under the bed. It's fine to play, but don't gamble, or matron will get angry and confiscate it. Got it, don't worry, I'll return it to you in a couple of days. William said, hurriedly grabbed the box, and quickly disappeared from the room. Done for, another one's gone crazy. Sigh, I wonder if teaching them to play mahjong was a mistake. Anjuin closed the door, speechless. Immediately afterward, Anjuin rubbed his hands together excitedly and opened the large cardboard box that William had brought. Soy sauce, sesame paste, vinegar, cooking wine, long time no see, my friends. Without a cell phone or computer, I can only make up for it in other ways. Eating British food every day is making me sick. This box contained nothing other than the seasonings that Anjuin had asked William to buy from Chinatown. Anjuin Wilson came to this world, not knowing whether he had transmigrated or been reincarnated. Many of his memories from his previous life had become blurred, but Anjuin still remembered some things, such as being born into a family of martial artists and having served in the military. He didn't know if the world he was in now was still the same world as before. He was born in an orphanage in the 60s or 70s, but since he was here, he had to adapt to the local customs. After all, Anjuin had the experience and memories of an adult, so he wasn't pretentious. The orphanage where Anjuin was located was under the jurisdiction of the church. William and his brothers, like Anjuin, had grown up in the orphanage and were a few years older than Anjuin, but William and his brothers listened to Anjuin very much. Why? Because they had to listen. Anjuin was very good at fighting. After all, he came from a family of martial artists and had also served in the military. Therefore, he paid great attention to physical exercise from a very young age. Military boxing, Tong Bei Fist, Wing Chun, Pigwa, Tai Chi, etc., had already formed a conditioned memory in his brain, and he could quickly regain them. So, after beating them up at the age of 9, William and the others were very well behaved in front of Anjuin. Under Anjuin's guidance, William and his brothers even started a business outside the orphanage. If I keep messing around like this, I'm going to become the head of a gangster group, collecting protection fees every day. Anjuin mocked himself, not thinking too much, and put away the seasonings in the box, preparing to take some time to cook some Chinese food for himself. After tidying up these materials, Anjuin turned around and locked the door of the room tightly. For him, after coming to this world, there was another secret that no one knew. He actually had superpowers. Anjuan stared at a 10-kilogram dumbbell placed in the corner, pointed at it slightly with his hand, and immediately saw the dumbbell floating quietly in the air as if being dragged by an invisible force. He controlled the dumbbell to float above him, ignoring it, and walked to the desk, quietly opening a book to read. This was a way of training superpowers that Anjuan had invented himself, which he called delayed training. When he was 7 or 8 years old, Anjuan felt that he was different from others. After finishing an exercise, he wanted to drink water, and as soon as the thought arose, the glass on the table flew towards him. Under Anjuan's observation, he found that at least in the orphanage, he was the only special one, so he was usually very careful. If he was discovered by others in this church-run welfare home, he might be treated as a monster or a heretic. Anjuan called this special ability superpower. Under his deliberate testing and practice, this ability went from sometimes there, sometimes not, to being able to be slightly mastered by him. He found that after practicing martial arts and standing in a stance, he could better grasp this power. He tentatively called it power. Anjuan himself analyzed that it was related to his state at the time. After finishing his stance, he would be in a state of emptying his brain, perhaps in that situation he could better grasp this power. From then on, Anjuan, who was already quite disciplined, had a strict plan for himself. After all, in his opinion, this was a special ability, and he couldn't waste it. He practiced martial arts, meditated on time every day, and exercised his superpower every day. His initial training method was actually similar to his usual physical exercise, which was to carry out weight training. After he could gradually control the superpower, he began targeted training, starting with teacups, books, etc., and later turning into chairs and tables, but he slowly discovered something was wrong. Chapter 2. Because Anjuan didn't feel very tired from the change in weight, and as someone who regularly did physical training, he knew this wasn't a good thing. It was like when you're building muscle and don't feel any tearing or fatigue, it proves you're not training hard enough. Therefore, Anjuan quickly adjusted his training, no longer blindly pursuing weight. He began to do endurance training, which meant using telekinesis to keep objects floating in the air for as long as possible. Sure enough, this had an effect. At first, he could only last for 5 minutes before starting to feel dizzy and lightheaded. He didn't dare to overtrain before he understood this ability, so he stopped when he reached his limit. However, after a day of rest, he felt no mental impact, so he felt relieved and made time for training every night after practicing his kung fu. After years of accumulation, Anjuan was able to persist for longer and longer. After more than a year of training, Anjuan can now maintain an object floating in the air for nearly 40 minutes. Anjuan manipulated the dumbbell floating in the air, causing it to rotate around him like planets orbiting the sun, and constantly changing its flight path, sometimes circling in a figure 8, sometimes flying up and down. After a while, Anjuan's mind felt a little tired. He knew that the training time was almost up, so he manipulated the dumbbell back to its place and stretched his body slightly. It's getting easier and easier to control. I wonder when I'll be able to fly with a sword like in the novels. Little did Anjuan know that while he was daydreaming, somewhere in the north of England, a magic school called Hogwarts was sending out owls with admission notices, and one of them was heading towards the Elrond's Church orphanage in London. The next morning at 6 o'clock, when almost no one in the orphanage was awake, Anjuan opened the window of his room, took a deep breath, changed his clothes, and slowly strolled to the courtyard of the orphanage. After stretching a little, he practiced a set of Tong Bei Fist in the courtyard. Huff! Anjuan exhaled comfortably. Covered in a thin layer of sweat, he stretched his body and walked towards the cafeteria as usual. Good morning, Mother Triss. I smelled the aroma of this pumpkin porridge from afar. Anjuan greeted the orphanage nun who was preparing breakfast with a smile. Good morning, Anjuan. You're back from your exercise. You get up so early every day. If the other children were half as sensible as you, I would be much more at ease, the elderly sister Triss said with a smile as she gave Anjuan a bowl of porridge. Anjuan took the breakfast and grinned without replying. He didn't dare to answer this, because if his body didn't contain the soul of an adult, he might be even more difficult to manage than the others. After a hasty breakfast, Anjuan thanked Mother Triss and got up to return to his room. As soon as he returned to his room, Anjuan felt that something was wrong. A brown owl was unloading goods on his desk. Of course, unloading goods here doesn't mean it was pooping, but it skillfully took off a letter from its leg and placed it on the table, then flew to the windowsill and quietly watched Anjuan. Looking at this scene, Anjuin faintly felt that the style was a bit off. He turned around and closed the door, walked straight to the desk, picked up the envelope, which had no stamp, and a line of emerald green ink was written in the middle of the envelope. To Mr. Anjuin Wilson, Elrond's Church Orphanage, Shaftesbury Avenue. Anjuin flipped the envelope over and saw a shield emblem on the back. The center of the emblem was a capital letter H, and the four corners of the shield were engraved with a lion, an eagle, a badger, and a snake. Holy crap, is this Hogwarts? Anjuin couldn't believe his eyes as he looked at the letter. You must know that Anjuin had never thought that he would come to a magical world. Even if he awakened his magic power, he thought it was just a special ability. But that's not right. Although Anjuin's memories of his previous life were a bit vague after transmigrating or being reborn, and he had never thought about this aspect, which made these marginal memories even more unclear, just like adults can't remember the plot of the cartoons they watched in their childhood. However, after all, he had seen the Harry Potter movies, and he vaguely remembered that they took place after the 1990s. But the time Anjuin is in now is 1980. Anjuin carefully recalled the memories of his previous life, only remembering the names Dumbledore, Harry Potter, Voldemort. The specific plot was very vague, but that was not important, because he was not in the same era as the movie plot at all. Okay, I thought I had a special ability, but it turns out everyone around me is a superhero. Anjuin was very speechless after discovering that the telekinesis he had always thought was a superpower was actually magic, but fortunately, he had the soul of an adult, and he calmed down after taking a few deep breaths. Anjuin stopped thinking wildly, took the envelope and sat at the desk, took out the parchment and read it carefully. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry Headmaster, Albus Dumbledore, President of the International Confederation of Wizards, President of the Wizengamot, Order of Merlin, First Class. Dear Mr. Wilson, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. The term begins on September 1st. We await your reply by owl no later than July 31st. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. First-year students will require 3 sets of plain work robes, black. 1 plain pointed hat, black, for day wear. A pair of protective gloves, dragon hide or similar. 1 winter cloak, black, silver fastenings. Please note that all students' clothes should carry name tags. Textbooks. All students should have the following books. The Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1 by Miranda Goshawk. A History of Magic by Bathilda Bagshot. Magical Theory by Adalbert Waffling. A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration by Emmerich Switch. 1000 Magical Herbs and Fungi by Phil Littaspore. Magical Drafts and Potions by Arsenius Jigger. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them by Newt's Commander. The Dark Forces, A Guide to Self-Protection by Quentin Trimble. Other equipment. 1 wand. 1 cauldron, pewter, standard size 2. 1 set of glass or crystal phials. 1 telescope. 1 set of brass scales. Students may also bring, if they desire, an owl or a cat or a toad. Parents are reminded that first years are not allowed their own broomsticks. Chapter 3. After reading the letter in detail, Anjuin stroked his chin and glanced at the owl on the windowsill. You're waiting for me to reply, aren't you? Too bad I've never had a pet before, so I don't have anything good to treat you with. The owl on the windowsill continued to stare at Anjuin with dead fish eyes. All right, I'll write back now. Anjuin shrugged and picked up the paper and pen on the desk to write a reply, expressing in a very sincere tone that he was very happy to attend Hogwarts, but regrettably stating that he had never been exposed to the magical world and that he was an orphan, asking if they could provide him with some assistance. After writing the reply, Anjuin sealed it in a brand new envelope and handed it to the owl. The owl on the windowsill very skillfully took the envelope, attached it to itself, and flew away without looking back. Ho, quite aloof. I wonder what the magical world is like at this time. Did Voldemort get killed by Harry? Anjuin only had a slight impression of Harry Potter. It seemed that Voldemort failed to kill Harry when he was young and was instead killed by Harry's counterattack, but Anjuin was really clueless about the state of the magical world in 1980. Don't think too much, just wait for Hogwarts' reply. Strength is the foundation in any world, and becoming stronger is definitely not wrong. With that thought, he continued with his studies for the day. Anjuin had arranged a very tight exercise program for himself during the summer vacation at the orphanage: warm-up, boxing, stance training, aerobic exercise, meditation, and training his telekinesis. Now magic. We're all proceeding in an orderly manner. With a disciplined life, time always passed quickly. Not long after receiving his Hogwarts acceptance letter, an uninvited guest came to find Anjuin. "Are you saying that you are Professor McGonagall from Hogwarts?" Anjuin asked the middle-aged woman who appeared at the door of his room. This woman, who claimed to be Professor McGonagall, wore square glasses, had black hair curled into a high bun, and wore a dark green robe. "That's right, I am Minerva McGonagall, the deputy headmistress of Hogwarts. I saw your reply, Mr. Wilson. We will conduct visits to Muggle families who have not been exposed to the magical world." Professor McGonagall possibly suddenly thought of Anjuin's background, and added, "Of course, also young gentlemen like you who live independently. Won't you invite me in to sit down, Mr. Wilson?" "Oh, no, I'm sorry, Professor McGonagall, please come in. I just haven't fully digested the whole magical school thing yet." Anjuin apologized and moved aside, inviting Professor McGonagall in. As soon as she entered the room, Professor McGonagall began to observe. The entire room was not large, with a bed, a set of tables and chairs, a desk connected to a bookshelf, a cabinet, a coat rack, and several dumbbells neatly placed in the corner. The bed was made neatly, and there was a pot of, if she wasn't mistaken, it was a pot of scallions. The tidy room and clean, refreshing atmosphere gave Professor McGonagall a good impression of Anjuin. After all, this was a sudden visit, which proved that this freshman was usually very disciplined. "Sorry, Professor McGonagall, the room is quite simple." Anjuin apologized to Professor McGonagall and went to move the only chair in the room. "Don't be polite, Anjuin, you don't mind me calling you that, do you? I've prepared my own chair." With that, Professor McGonagall took out her wand from her robe and pointed it at the dumbbell by the wall. The dumbbell instantly transformed into a wooden chair and gently sat down. Anjuin was also taken aback by Professor McGonagall's move. After all, seeing it on TV was not the same as experiencing it in person. However, he did not lose his composure, pulled out a chair, and sat down facing Professor McGonagall. "I saw that the reply was required by July 31st. I thought I would only receive a reply or visit in August. That's mainly for children from many wizarding families. We will visit children who have not been exposed to the magical world in advance, and the current magical world is quite sensitive." Professor McGonagall hesitated, but did not talk too much about it and went straight to the point. "Children with magical talent will be notified of enrollment at the appropriate age. Hogwarts will teach underage wizards how to control and use magic very well. I believe you should have felt some special things happening around you in recent years. Underage wizards will gradually awaken their magic power, and sometimes even produce magical surges." Anjuin nodded after hearing this, waved his hand, and a cup floated in front of him. Professor McGonagall was secretly shocked by the scene. Was he able to freely master the levitation charm? It should be known that this was wordless and wandless casting. "Mr. Anjuin, are you sure you haven't learned or been taught magic before?" "Yes, Professor McGonagall. When I discovered that I was different from others, I started practicing slowly, through meditation and the like. I thought it was a special ability. That's what we ordinary people call it. Of course, that's all. I can't do something like turning a dumbbell into a chair like you did," Anjuin said. "You will learn it at Hogwarts." After hearing Anjuin's words, Professor McGonagall became more and more satisfied with this underage wizard. Self-discipline, diligence, and effort were all good qualities for a wizarding talent. Suddenly thinking of the current chaos in the magical world and the darkness lurking in the shadows, she couldn't help but feel a little anxious. "Anjuin, I am very pleased to see you working so hard. Let's set off quickly. Our time is tight. We need to coordinate with the orphanage and take you to prepare the things you need for school in advance." Professor McGonagall was decisive and efficient to an outrageous degree. After communicating with the orphanage's higher-ups separately, she quickly handled Anjuin's schooling matters with the orphanage. Anjuin suspected that Professor McGonagall must have used some magic, as the orphanage did not raise any questions. "Did you use magic when communicating with Sister Therese and the others?" They agreed so readily, Anjuin couldn't help but ask. "A little confundus charm, which helps to improve efficiency, doesn't it?" Professor McGonagall rarely showed a slightly playful smile. "Don't worry, this will not have any adverse effects on them, and they will not forget you. You can still return here during your vacations." "Okay, next I will take you to buy the supplies you need for school. Given your situation, I have applied for a scholarship for needy students for you from the school board, which can provide a subsidy of 12 galleons per year. Oh, by the way, galleons are the currency of the wizarding world. 1 galleon can be exchanged for 17 silver sickles, and 1 silver sickle can be exchanged for 29 nuts. Is it fair to say that it is Britain, even currency exchange is so painful, Anjuin has a headache. Chapter 4. Can't British pounds be used in the magical world? You can exchange Muggle currency for galleons at Gringotts, £5 for 1 galleon, but there's a limit to how much you can exchange, a maximum of 100 galleons. Read. Professor McGonagall, who is in charge of admissions all year round, is very clear about all aspects of the matter, but she doesn't think Anjuin has much savings, maybe just some pocket money to exchange. Oh, I see. Then I have money. As she spoke, she took out a wad of pounds under Professor McGonagall's surprised gaze, and licked her fingers with great skill to count them. That's enough. I can buy something else on the way back with the extra. Professor McGonagall led Anjuin out of the orphanage and turned into a deserted alley next to it. I should have taken Muggle transportation or the night bus with you to Diagon Alley, but the magical world has been a bit unstable recently, so I have to trouble you to apparate with me. With that, Professor McGonagall drew her wand and said, "Grab my hand, Anjuin. The magical world is unstable?" While digesting Professor McGonagall's words, Anjuin handed over his hand. Then, in a series of pop sounds, Professor McGonagall and Anjuin disappeared from the spot. Ugh! As soon as Anjuin apparat with Professor McGonagall, he couldn't help but lean against the wall and vomit. The feeling was too uncomfortable, as if he had been thrown into a dark washing machine and put on the strongest setting. His whole body was inexplicably squeezed, and in the end, Anjuin even hallucinated, as if his whole body had been shrunk into a small ball. "Sorry, I didn't feel well the first time I used this magic either," Professor McGonagall said, then pointed her wand at Anjuin. A soft stream of light emerged from the tip of the wand and gradually merged into Anjuin's body, which made Anjuin feel much better. Fortunately, Anjuin was usually in good physical condition and had a good sense of balance. After a little while, he calmed down. "Is this magic? Why does it feel different from what I imagined? Isn't it too low level to open a magic door for teleportation?" Anjuin complained in his heart, but his expression remained calm. "Where are we going next? Do we have to teleport again?" "That's not teleportation, it's apparition and disapparition. This is a common travel magic for adult wizards. You can learn it when you're in 7th year. And don't worry, we're almost there." Professor McGonagall led Anjuin out of the alley where they had appeared, walked for a while on the street, and came to a place between a record store and a bookstore. Anjuin kept observing his surroundings and found that a bar with a style completely different from the 2 shops next to it was actually opened between the 2 shops, and the passers-by turned a blind eye to it. "Can't they see this bar?" "Excellent observation, Anjuin. A large number of concealment charms have been placed here. Muggles can't see the leaky cauldron," Professor McGonagall explained as she led Anjuin into the bar. "Professor, what do you often mean by Muggle? Does it refer to ordinary people who don't know magic?" Anjuin felt absurd. He vaguely remembered seeing Harry Potter in his previous life, but when he really came into contact with it, he still had no common sense. "Yes, Anjuin. We generally call ordinary people who don't believe in magic, or non-magical humans, Muggles. Due to the International Statute of Secrecy, Muggles don't know we exist. I wonder if the International Statute of Secrecy can continue to exist in the British magical world in the future." Professor McGonagall frowned slightly as she thought of the current situation in the British magical world. "Is that so? Then my parents were also Muggles." Anjuin thought of his parents who had passed away not long after he was born. He had checked at the orphanage before and didn't feel anything unusual. They were just ordinary people. Anjuin attributed all his magical talent to his reincarnation. "Maybe someone in your ancestry was a wizard. Of course, children with wizarding talents can also be born among Muggles. Hogwarts' responsibility is to teach you how to control your magic." Anjuin and Professor McGonagall walked into the bar while chatting. The bar was very dark and simple, with extremely poor lighting. There was a bar counter, and a few tables were placed in the shadows in the corner. And it didn't seem to have much business. The bar owner was silently wiping glasses at the bar. "Tom, how's business lately?" Professor McGonagall seemed to be very familiar with the owner. How else can it be? It's been getting more and more chaotic recently. Last night, the Aurors and them had another firefight in Nocturne Alley. The explosion almost shattered my glasses here, and business is getting worse and worse. Tom felt like he hadn't talked to anyone, and he kept complaining as soon as he opened his mouth. All right, Tom, there's a young gentleman here. Is he an incoming freshman? Tom glanced at him, guessing that he was used to it. Hello, sir. Anjuin, who came from a country of etiquette, seemed polite. Go in quickly, it won't be safe when it gets dark. Seeing the polite Anjuin, Tom kindly reminded him. Professor McGonagall nodded to the bar owner and led Anjuin through the bar to the small patio behind the leaky cauldron. Diagon Alley is inside. You'll buy your school supplies here in the future. Look carefully, you'll have to come by yourself. You can enter by tapping the specific bricks on the wall next to the trash can with your wand. Count 3 bricks above the trash can, and then 2 bricks horizontally. With that, Professor McGonagall drew her wand and tapped the corresponding position. The original dilapidated brick wall kept tumbling after Professor McGonagall tapped it, gradually transforming into a tall arch. Welcome to Diagon Alley, Anjuin. Anjuin looked at this scene with his mouth slightly open, and became more and more fascinated by the magical world. Looking through the arch, what came into view was a long street paved with cobblestones, with various shops distributed on both sides of the long street. However, Anjuin noticed that Diagon Alley was not as bustling as he had imagined at this time. Some shops on both sides of the street were not open, and there were some pedestrians in trench coats on the road. The way they looked didn't seem like they were shopping, but rather like they were patrolling. Professor, those passers-by in trench coats don't look like customers. Could it be? Anjuin asked his question. Combined with the conversation between Professor McGonagall and Tom at the beginning, an ominous thought arose in his heart. Those are Aurors maintaining law and order here. The magical world hasn't been very peaceful recently, but this is the most prosperous commercial street in the British magical world, and it's still very safe. They're just doing their routine duties, and don't worry, you'll be very safe at Hogwarts, I guarantee it. Professor McGonagall explained to Anjuin. Chapter 5. Let's go, we'll head to Gringotts to exchange some money first, I imagine you can't wait, Professor McGonagall said, knowing Anjuin had considerable savings. Gringotts is the only wizarding bank in Britain, run by a group of goblins. It's known as the second safest place in the world, second only to Hogwarts, Professor McGonagall explained to Anjuin as they walked. Under Professor McGonagall's guidance, Anjuin arrived at a fork in the road. One signpost read Nocturne Alley, while the other pointed to the main road of Diagon Alley. A white building stood at the intersection of Diagon Alley and Nocturne Alley, with goblin guards in scarlet and gold uniforms standing at the entrance. After entering, they passed through a gleaming bronze door, where the goblin guards on either side bowed as they passed. Beyond the second silver door was a spacious marble hall, with about 100 goblins sitting behind long counters, scribbling in large ledgers. Some weighed coins on scales, while others examined gemstones with magnifying glasses. It seemed that the outside turmoil had not had much impact on the lives of these goblins. Under Professor McGonagall's guidance, Anjuin arrived at a counter, presented his Hogwarts acceptance letter, and received a grant of 12 galleons for underprivileged students. Although Anjuin had money to exchange, he figured since he'd already applied, he might as well take it. Afterwards, he exchanged pounds for 100 galleons. For an 11-year-old, this was a fortune. Anjuin, clutching the pouch full of galleons, walked out of Gringotts and took out a coin to examine it closely. It looks like pure gold, but it feels different from ordinary gold. They're made by goblins using gold, using unique goblin craftsmanship. It's said that they also apply special goblin magic to prevent outsiders from counterfeiting them directly with gold. I think you're eager to have a wand of your own. In the magical world, you can't move an inch without a wand, Professor McGonagall said, amused, looking at Anjuin clutching his fortune. As she spoke, Professor McGonagall led Anjuin to Ollivander's wand shop, a wand shop with a long history. Anjuin followed Professor McGonagall into the shop. The shop appeared to be a cramped, narrow, and dilapidated little place. A wand was displayed in the window on a faded purple cushion. Inside, the shelves reaching to the ceiling were filled with thousands upon thousands of long, narrow boxes. Behind the counter, a thin old man was quietly wiping a wand. Good afternoon, Mr. Ollivander, we've come to buy a wand. Ah, Minerva, 9.5 inches, fir wood, it's been a while since I've seen you. Time flies, it's time for new students to enroll again. Ollivander looked down at Professor McGonagall, then glanced at Anjuin beside her. These past few days haven't been easy, did you hear about yesterday? Yesterday's unrest will not continue. You must have faith in the Ministry of Magic and Dumbledore. Professor McGonagall interrupted Ollivander, glancing at Anjuin, afraid that spreading these negative messages would undermine the young wizard's faith in the magical world. Yes, Dumbledore, if it weren't for him holding things together, I'd probably have closed shop and left long ago. But enough of that, let me see what kind of wand this young gentleman is suited for. Ollivander did not continue the previous topic, turning to look at Anjuin. Hello, sir, I'm Anjuin Wilson. Hello, Mr. Wilson, there aren't many polite young people like you these days, Mr. Ollivander said with a smile, taking out a long roll of measuring tape with silver markings from his coat pocket. Which hand do you favor? I'm used to using my right hand. Ollivander began to measure Anjuin, first from shoulder to fingertip, then from wrist to elbow. So young, yet so strong, impressive. Ollivander couldn't help but admire as he felt Anjuin's hard arm muscles. Anjuin couldn't help but get goosebumps all over his body. Was there something wrong with this old man? Using a ruler to measure was one thing, but groping all over his body? Did buying a wand mean getting groped? Ollivander moved quickly, and while Anjuin was still lost in thought, he had already pulled a wand from the shelf and handed it over. Try this one, ash wood, phoenix feather, 11.5 inches, resilient and brave. Anjuin took it and waved it gently, and a ball of fire suddenly burst from the tip of the wand. Well, it doesn't seem to suit you. Ollivander hurriedly took the wand away and took out a new one. See how this one is, elm, dragon heartstring, 9.75 inches, a symbol of wisdom and elegance. Anjuin had just taken it when Ollivander snatched it away. Looks like it's not this one either. Let's try this one, red oak, male unicorn hair, 10.5 inches, exceptionally agile. Anjuin took it and waved it gently, and the vase on the counter exploded directly. Okay, it seems you're already sharp enough, this is a bit too sensitive, Ollivander said, taking back the wand. Don't worry, you'll definitely find a wand that suits you here. Next, Anjuin tried several more wands, but Ollivander said they were not suitable. Try this one, thunderstruck wood, from a stout ebony tree, thunderbird feather, 12.25 inches, firm and unwavering determination, very tough. This is still made with materials that Newt once gave me, it's invaluable. It took a lot of effort to process this wand back then, but it occasionally produces electric arcs. It's not easy to get its approval, picky customers should try picky wands. Ollivander handed over an ebony-like wand. As soon as Anjuin saw this jade-like wand, he was attracted by its depth. As soon as he took it, he felt that the wand in his hand was connected to his blood, becoming an extension of his body. Anjuin waved the wand gently, and a slight electric light flashed at the tip of the wand, flickering slightly. This is the one. I am sincerely happy every time a wand finds its suitable owner. I can see that it likes you very much, Ollivander said happily. He was a pure craftsman, and he was very happy to find a home for his work. Thank you, Mr. Ollivander, I like it very much too, Anjuin said, overjoyed, playing with the wand he had just obtained. Ebony is very suitable for combat magic and transfiguration, I believe it will shine in your hands. In addition, the first wand for wizards is uniformly priced at 7 galleons, and the excess will be subsidized by Hogwarts. Don't lose or damage it. Ollivander reminded. Don't worry, Mr. Ollivander, Anjuin paid happily, thanked Mr. Ollivander again, and walked out of Ollivander's wand shop with Professor McGonagall. Chapter 6. All right, Anjuin, we've spent quite a bit of time picking out a wand. Next, we need to hurry and buy the other equipment. Reading M, Professor McGonagall said to Anjuin, looking at the sky. Yes, Professor. Next, accompanied by Professor McGonagall, Anjuin went to Scribulus writing implements and bought enough parchment, ink, and several quills. He also purchased a cauldron, wizard robes, and a complete set of textbooks needed for school at Madame Malkin's Robes for All Occasions, Flourish and Blots, and Potage's Cauldron Shop. Anjuin also bought an owl and pet food. He always found owls to be cheap and funny looking. Before long, a considerable amount of time had been spent in Diagon Alley, and the evening sunset was shining down. Let's stop here, Anjuin. The things you need for school have basically been purchased. It's getting late, so I'll send you back. Although Diagon Alley is still relatively safe, young people should try not to wander around at night. Thank you, Professor McGonagall. Before leaving, let me treat you to a cold drink. After all, you've wasted most of the day, and this is to express my gratitude. Anjuin suggested to Professor McGonagall, seeing that there was still some time before dark. At the same time, he had been in Diagon Alley for so long and was a little tired. He also wanted to ask Professor McGonagall about things in the magical world. All right, but don't take too much time, Professor McGonagall thought for a moment and agreed, feeling that it wouldn't take too long. After saying that, the two came to Florian Fortescue's ice cream parlor in Diagon Alley, ordered 2 cold drinks, and found a place to sit down. Professor McGonagall, now that I have a wand, can I practice spells? Anjuin asked the professor after taking a sip of his drink. Don't be too ambitious, Anjuin. Spells are much more complicated than you think. Releasing spells randomly can have terrible consequences, especially in the Muggle world. This is a sensitive period, and the Ministry of Magic's detection of magical reactions is very strict. The Ministry of Magic has a spell to detect magical activity by wizards under the age of 17, called the Trace. The Ministry of Magic uses it to discover underage magic, so don't use your wand casually in the orphanage. If you use a spell in a gathering place of wizards, the Ministry of Magic may not be able to accurately locate you, but in the Muggle world, it's like a firefly in the dark night, Professor McGonagall patiently explained to Anjuin. Does that mean it's okay if I use spells in Diagon Alley? Anjuin asked. Theoretically, yes, but casting spells randomly without guidance is very dangerous. I know that young wizards like you have a great thirst for knowledge, but I think you'd better put your thirst for knowledge and curiosity in school. Professor McGonagall still fulfilled her duty as a teacher and patiently guided Anjuin. Okay, I understand. Anjuin casually replied, not knowing what he was planning in his heart. Are there many professors like you at Hogwarts? What are you usually busy with? And the headmaster of the school, is it Professor Dumbledore? What kind of person is he? Anjuin transformed into a Y-machine, completely ignoring whether Professor McGonagall could stand it. I think you should go to Ravenclaw, young Mr. Wilson. Although Professor McGonagall complained, she still patiently explained his questions to Anjuin. Dumbledore is the most powerful wizard in the current wizarding world, at least we think so. You can slowly understand him after you enter school. Today, the headmaster is in Hogsmeade, a pure wizard village next to the school. He needs to interview a professor for divination, although I personally don't think it's necessary to open a divination class separately. Professor McGonagall. I didn't expect to meet you here. Just as Professor McGonagall and Anjuin were chatting, a woman's voice came from the door. Anjuin turned his head and saw a man and a woman walking in from the door. The man wore glasses and had bright light brown eyes. His black hair was neatly combed. The woman standing beside him was pregnant, with long dark red hair and almond-shaped eyes. After they greeted Professor McGonagall, they walked towards this side. Lily, James, what are you doing here? Professor McGonagall was surprised to see them and stood up to greet them. Anjuin also stood up when he saw this. Our child is about to be born, so we came to buy some things. What about you? James explained to Professor McGonagall, and happened to look at Anjuin standing beside him. Ah, you're here to pick up a new student for shopping. Ordinary wizard families don't need you to come in person. It seems you're here for a Muggle wizard. Young man, where are your parents? Why did they leave you here alone? James Potter asked Anjuin bluntly, feeling like he was one of the family. Lily next to him squeezed James's arm, and James looked at his lover in confusion. Your eyes are very sharp. I am indeed a Muggle wizard. As for my parents, I'm sorry, I'm an orphan. My parents passed away a long time ago. Although he felt a little offended, Anjuin was not angry because of this. After all, these were the facts. He was a forward-looking person and not so pretentious. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. James probably realized that he had said something wrong and quickly apologized to Anjuin. On the contrary, Anjuin shrugged his shoulders generously. This is Anjuin Wilson, a new student who is preparing to enroll this year. These two are James Potter and Lily Potter, two of your graduated seniors. Come and sit down together. You just ran to Diagon Alley like this, Lily is still pregnant, aren't you afraid of danger? Professor McGonagall smoothed things over, introduced them to each other, and sat down together. We're not afraid, but unfortunately Lily is about to give birth, so I have to take care of her first, and we have to make some preparations. James looked at his lover Lily, thinking that his child was about to be born, and smiled foolishly again. Seeing this scene, Anjuin couldn't help but guess their identities, staring at Lily and asked, "How many months is the child? Is he about to be born? Have you thought of a name?" Lily looked at this Muggle wizard freshman and felt very kind. "It is expected to be at the end of the month. As for the child's name, we have discussed it. If it is a boy, it will be called Harry Potter." Lily finished speaking and looked at James, full of happiness. Anjuin completely confirmed it now. These were the parents of the future savior, the Potters. Although he didn't remember the plot very well, he still knew the protagonist's name. This also confirmed what Anjuin had always felt was wrong. Harry's parents were still alive, which meant that Voldemort had not died at this point in time. No wonder there were not many customers in the entire Diagon Alley, and there were Aurors patrolling everywhere. Chapter 7. Anjuin didn't have much recollection of Harry Potter's childhood, only that Voldemort broke into the Potters' home, killed Harry's parents, and Harry somehow rebounded the curse, killing Voldemort. He couldn't remember any other details. Should he tell them, or warn them? Looking at their happy faces, Anjuin was conflicted. Lily, noticing Anjuin frowning, asked, "What's wrong? Are you nervous about starting school?" "I'm a Muggle-born witch myself, and when I found out I was going to Hogwarts, I couldn't sleep for nights. But once you get to Hogwarts, you definitely won't regret it. I wonder which house you'll be sorted into. Gryffindor would be best, but the other houses are good too, except Slytherin." James chimed in, enthusiastically promoting Gryffindor to Anjuin. Although he only mentioned Slytherin briefly, it was clear James didn't like them much. "Don't listen to him, trust yourself, Anjuin. Each house has its own characteristics. No matter which house you're sorted into, as long as you study hard and figure out what kind of person you want to be, you can achieve great things no matter which house you graduate from." Lily clearly wasn't a fan of James's house recommendations. "Thank you, I'll keep your advice in mind." Anjuin, with the soul of an adult, wasn't nervous about starting school, of course, but seeing the kind Lily sharing her experiences, he didn't want to interrupt her. However, Anjuin still couldn't directly warn the Potters about their fate. Was he supposed to tell them that one day Voldemort would break into their home and kill them all, only to be defeated by their son? They wouldn't believe him, and if it aroused suspicion, he might be captured by the Ministry of Magic or Dumbledore for research. Besides, they were already Voldemort's enemies and probably prepared to face the Dark Lord. "All right, it's getting late, Anjuin. Let me take you back. It's not safe at night. James, Lily, you too." "Yes, Professor McGonagall." Anjuin and Professor McGonagall began to get up and pack their things. Before leaving, Anjuin turned to Lily and said, "Mrs. Potter, please be careful even at home. Also, I believe your child will make you proud." Anjuin didn't know what else to say, but facing this kind woman, he couldn't help but offer a few words of warning. As for their future, he didn't have the power to interfere with it at the moment. "Thank you for your blessing, Anjuin." Lily looked at the young student and felt a sense of connection, perhaps reminding her of her past self, or perhaps reminding her of the person she had been childhood sweethearts with. "This is a little trinket I made, consider it a charm, a gift to celebrate your admission, and you can write to me anytime." Lily looked at Anjuin and took something out of her handbag, handing it over. Anjuin took it and saw a copper coin with a doe engraved on it, looking lifelike. "Thank you for the gift, I will cherish it." Anjuin solemnly put away the little gift from Lily, said goodbye to the Potters again, and left with Professor McGonagall. After another apparition, Anjuin, having experienced this uncomfortable journey again, didn't react as strongly as the first time. He shook his slightly pale face, said goodbye to Professor McGonagall, and returned to the orphanage alone. Anjuin returned to his room in the orphanage, sat on the bed, and recalled everything that had happened today. The magical world held a strong attraction for him. But Anjuin also thought that in the current magical world, Voldemort hadn't died yet, and he didn't know what the situation was like at Hogwarts during this time. It was too dangerous. He wasn't comfortable entrusting his life to others, especially since he was Muggle-born. In the current magical world, he had to have the ability to protect himself, otherwise he might be killed by Voldemort and his followers one day. Anjuin recalled the information he had gathered from Professor McGonagall today and summarized the following points. First, the Ministry of Magic was under martial law. Previously, underage wizards were only detected by the trace after enrollment, but now they would be monitored as soon as they possessed a wand. Second, because the trace was a range monitor, the Ministry of Magic could not determine who was casting spells in places where wizards gathered. Third, Dumbledore was still in charge, the Ministry of Magic was actively resisting, and Diagon Alley was relatively safe. Having made up his mind, Anjuin decided to leave the orphanage as soon as possible and settle in Diagon Alley. He had to have some self-defense capabilities before enrollment. With that in mind, Anjuin took out his wand. Looking at the jade-like material, the matte texture, and the dark and deep wand, he sighed softly, "From now on, we'll depend on each other. I'll give you a name, let's call you Dark Canvas. Are you ready to let the magical world see how powerful we are?" As if responding to Anjuin, Anjuin felt Dark Canvas tremble slightly in his hand, emitting several arcs of electricity, but without causing him any harm, only making him feel that his connection with the wand was even deeper. Firm in his thoughts, Anjuin rested early, preparing to start his plan tomorrow. Meanwhile, Hogwarts in the night was like a sleeping dragon, silent but full of the beauty of power. Professor McGonagall went up the stairs to Dumbledore's office. "Dumbledore, how did the interview go tonight? I don't have much hope for the divination position. Even in the magical world, most seers are just frauds," Professor McGonagall said, watching Dumbledore teasing the Phoenix Fox. "Then I regret to inform you that we will soon be welcoming Hogwarts' first divination teacher, Minerva." Dumbledore recalled the earth-shattering prophecy he had heard in Hogsmeade today, calmed his mind, raised his eyebrows, and turned back to Professor McGonagall, while changing the subject again. "How did you feel about the Muggle-born student today? You seem to be in a good mood." "He seems to be called An. Anjuin Wilson, a very disciplined and polite child, both from my own observation and from the information I learned from his orphanage. And we happened to meet the Potters today. Lily's child is expected to be born at the end of the month, and Anjuin happened to become their friend." Professor McGonagall praised the new student without hesitation when Dumbledore brought him up. Anjuin had left her with a very good impression. Chapter 8. "Are you talking about Lily Potter?" Dumbledore seemed more interested in the Potter's child. "Their child is due at the end of the month? Are you sure?" "That's what they say, and they even sent Anjuin a gift. I can feel a strong magical aura from it. She's been saying she's preparing to make some alchemical items to practice her skills and test her rune level. It seems the results are good." Reading. "And that child is much more independent than I imagined, and his savings are richer than I believed. It's hard to imagine how an 11-year-old child managed that in an orphanage, but inquiring about other people's privacy is not a good behavior." Professor McGonagall was clearly not on the same wavelength as Headmaster Dumbledore, and was still talking about Anjuin. "Is that so? I heard the Longbottom's child is also due soon. Could it be one of them?" Dumbledore muttered to himself, clearly more interested in Lily's child than the new students who would be enrolling this year. "One of whom?" Professor McGonagall was confused by Dumbledore's mutterings. "Oh, never mind, Minerva. You're tired today. Go and rest early. The Order of the Phoenix meeting is still at the same place tomorrow. We still have many problems to solve together. The Death Eaters have been increasingly active recently." New Book 69. Dumbledore still hadn't confirmed his thoughts. "Understood, Dumbledore." Professor McGonagall frowned as she remembered the lingering shadows, and turned to leave. Dumbledore remained sitting at his desk, deep in thought. No one knew what he was plotting. The next day, Anjuin said goodbye to Sister Therese and William, packed his luggage, and went to the Leaky Cauldron alone. "What did you say? You're going to stay here alone until Hogwarts starts?" Tom, the owner of the Leaky Cauldron, looked at Anjuin in disbelief. "Yes, Mr. Tom. Don't worry, I have money." Anjuin took out a few gold galleons from his pocket and said to Tom. "It's not about the money, Mr. Wilson. You may not realize the problem. It's not safe here right now. Please forgive me, but I can't agree. This is for your own good." Tom looked at Anjuin seriously and said to him. "I understand, Mr. Tom. Professor McGonagall already explained the seriousness of the problem to me yesterday, but I still insist. And I think a minor Muggle-born wizard is in more danger living in the Muggle world. I want to trust you. When I have nothing to do here, I can help you with chores and chat with you, can't I? Anjuin raised his head and looked at Tom firmly with his dark eyes, clearly not planning to leave. Tom frowned as he looked at the boy in front of him. After thinking it over, he agreed. After all, there were still many Aurors patrolling here. Letting a Muggle-born wizard wander around outside might cause problems. All right, anyway, I don't have much business here recently. I'll give you a discount and charge you 5 gold galleons for a month and a half of room and board. But you have to promise me not to run around randomly. It's best to stay in the store. There's a curfew after 8 p.m. You must return to your room. No problem, Mr. Tom. I'll be well behaved. Don't worry. After Anjuin saw that Tom had agreed, he paid the money readily, took the room key, and moved his luggage into the room one by one. Anjuin placed the scallions he had grown in front of the windowsill. He had brought a lot of things this time. In addition to the school supplies and some luggage, he even brought the seasonings William had bought before, and a set of mahjong. In his previous life, Anjuin had been in the army and came from a family of martial artists. He didn't have any hobbies before, but he had a craving for good food. He had been eating British food in this world for more than 10 years, which made him very depressed. He had long hated it. After settling in, Anjuin looked around the room. It was not small, and there was enough space for basic exercise, but not much space to practice boxing. He mainly practiced Tong Bei Fist, Pigwa, Chong Chuan, Hong Chuan, etc., but now he couldn't fully use them. Now, in addition to standing still in the room, he could only practice Tai Chi. After thinking about it, Anjuin took out paper and planned his daily study and training content. He was an extremely disciplined person and very self-disciplined. Now, except that the quilt might not be folded into tofu blocks, he basically lived according to the habits he had in the army. This is how he arranged it for himself. Wake up at 6 o'clock to wash and do morning exercises. Training content, stretching, standing Hu and pile for 30 minutes, aerobic training and boxing for 30 minutes. Have breakfast at 7:30, then start reading and practicing spells. Have lunch from 12 o'clock to 1300 hours. Continue studying and practicing spells at 1300 hours. Have dinner at 1800 hours, then rest or continue practicing spells depending on the situation. Practice boxing, stand still, and meditate at 2000 hours. Wash and go to bed at 2100 hours. Help Tom with chores during meal and rest times. In this month and a half, Anjuin decided not to be human, and wanted to absorb as much magical knowledge and practice as possible. After making detailed plans, Anjuin looked at the time. It was close to 12 o'clock, so he decided to go downstairs to eat. He chatted with Tom in the hall for a few words, and then found that the catering services provided here were basically British food. After confirming with Tom, Anjuin took out the seasonings he had bought before and personally cooked a few dishes, and invited Tom to have a meal, which brought the two customers closer together. After the host and guests were happy, Anjuin prepared to officially begin his magical journey. Anjuin's main focus was on Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1, Magical Theory, and The Dark Forces, a guide to self-protection. He planned to quickly learn a few spells first. Transfiguration was too difficult without guidance, and herbology and potions required more practical mastery. Without rushing to practice directly, Anjuin quickly read through the books, marking the key points or things he didn't understand with a pen. Soon, time passed unknowingly. After having breakfast the next day, Anjuin prepared to practice the first spell of his life, the levitation charm, because after years of practice, he could already levitate objects without a wand, so he decided to start with the part he was best at first. Wingardium Leviosa. Anjuin compared the spells and gestures in the book, took out his wand and began to cast a spell on a book on the table. Anjuin felt an invisible energy connecting himself, the wand, and the book. He lifted the book into the air with almost no effort. Well, I feel much more relaxed after using the spell. Does the spell make the magic more stable? Then Anjuin put down his wand, and also facing the book, tried to make it fly directly as before, but after trying for a long time, it had no effect. Chapter 9. Strange, why can't I find that old feeling after using the wand? Anjuin couldn't help but wonder. Could it be that the wand is not just a tool for casting spells, but also plays a role in regulating magic? Or is it that the magic was active and unstable before, so it was easier to use without a wand, and the wand makes casting spells easier because casting spells through the wand increases the stability of magic flow. Anjuin pondered the different possibilities, then picked up his wand and cast the levitation charm several times, repeatedly experiencing the feeling of casting spells with the wand, and sensing the operation of that power in his body, before putting down the wand. Reading. He stood up, his legs slightly bent, his mingmen protruding backward, his chi retracted into his dantian, his eyes slightly closed, and he concentrated his mind, gradually relaxing the muscles of his whole body, and no longer thinking about the feeling of mobilizing magic without a wand, but began to capture the magic trajectory when casting spells with a wand in his mind. After a while, Anjuin slowly opened his eyes, and the book used to practice spells was already floating in front of him. Using a wand to cast spells can guide and utilize magic more reasonably, making it more efficient. The previous method was too crude, so it doesn't work after having a better solution. Anjuin summarized the current and past methods of mobilizing magic, trying to draw a conclusion. What no one expected was that Anjuin had inadvertently mastered the knack of wandless and silent casting while practicing this simplest levitation charm. Years of continuous practice not only increased Anjuin's proficiency in the levitation charm, but also made him more sensitive to magic. At the same time, his total magic power and strength were unmatched by other peers after years of training. After finding the feeling, it is more important to consolidate it. Anjuin spent almost all of his time casting the levitation charm next, sometimes with a wand, sometimes without a wand, sometimes chanting, and sometimes not chanting. Soon Anjuin felt that he gradually had a thorough understanding of this spell. Anjuin, who wanted to practice for a while, heard his stomach gurgling and looked at the time and realized it was already evening, and he had missed lunch. Anjuin knew the importance of combining work and rest, and quickly calmed down and prepared to go downstairs for dinner. Boy, young people shouldn't just sleep in their rooms, you didn't even come down for lunch. Tom, who was reading the newspaper at the bar, was angry when he saw Anjuin coming downstairs, thinking that Anjuin had slept from morning till night. Haha, you're not complaining that I didn't come down to cook for you at noon, are you? Since showing Tom his cooking skills yesterday at noon, he had personally cooked dinner and today's breakfast. Anjuin was in a good mood and couldn't help but joke with the boss. I'm just worried about you, afraid you'll starve to death in the room, humph. Tom was angry when he saw that Anjuin was still in the mood to joke. My fault, you rest, I'll show you my skills tonight, I guarantee you'll be satisfied. Anjuin replied to Tom with a smile, and walked into the kitchen. Anjuin made a very rich dinner, and Tom also poured Anjuin a glass of butter beer. Anjuin found this strange drink from the magical world very novel. It tasted like butter, but it didn't have a greasy taste. I saw you were reading the newspaper just now, is there any news? It's getting more and more chaotic recently. That mysterious man and his Death Eaters are fighting with the Ministry of Magic again. An aura from the Ministry of Magic was seriously injured because of this. I don't know when this day will end. Tom was obviously very worried about the current situation. Death Eaters? Are they the people who follow Voldemort? Anjuin learned another somewhat familiar new word. The relevant memories are too far away, and now some things have to start again. After Anjuin finished dinner with Tom, with a wave of his hand, the empty bowls and plates on the table flew to the kitchen sink under his command. Tom's eyes widened at this scene. Such skilled wandless magic, even if it's just a simple levitation charm, few adult wizards can do it. This is the result of not eating lunch. Anjuin returned to his room with a smile in Tom's shock. In the following days, Anjuin constantly learned many new spells, such as Alohomora, Lumos, Scour Jiffy, Impervious, Augmenti and other functional spells, or Impedimenta, Flipendo, Expulso and other dark magic defense spells. Some spells can be released according to the spells and casting techniques in the textbook, and some spells can't be understood by just reading the book, so he goes downstairs to ask Tom for advice, and he can basically master them. However, the only spell that can be skillfully used through wandless casting is still the levitation charm. Anjuin believes that this is still because he is not proficient enough in the corresponding spells, and he has also summarized some rules of the spells. First of all, the effect and strength of the same spell cast by different people are different. For example, Tom's Lumos is much brighter than Anjuin's, because Tom is more proficient in the spell and has a deeper understanding. Secondly, will and emotions also affect the strength of the spell. This is what Anjuin learned from Tom. For example, the more firm the will and the stronger the determination for attack spells, the stronger the effect. Anjuin released Lumos after brewing emotions, and the effect was indeed much better than simply casting the spell. Many dark wizards are experts in researching dark magic, and spells can also affect the wizard's emotions in reverse. Therefore, Anjuin concluded that will, emotions, and proficiency will all affect the strength of the spell, and strength and total magic power determine the upper limit of a magic. So Anjuin quickly adjusted the content of his next study. Anjuin believes that the most important thing at present is self-protection, and the fastest way to protect himself is to quickly master a specialized spell. First of all, it must be simple and easy to learn. It's not okay if you can't learn it now. Secondly, it must be versatile, and it's best if the upper limit is high. He calculated the self-defense spells he had learned and decided to specialize in one of the Impedimenta, Expelliarmus, and Expulso. You know, when playing games in his previous life, Anjuin liked to play the extreme flow, that is, when adding points, he would madly stack one attribute or skill until he couldn't stack it anymore. Anyway, in a word, if you can't beat it, it's because your strength is not enough. After thinking again and again, Anjuin decided to practice Impedimenta first, because he mastered this spell very quickly when learning it, which made Anjuin feel that this spell was more compatible with him. Secondly, he believed that this spell had a high degree of development. If he could get his wish, then Impedimenta would be an offensive and defensive spell. Chapter 10. Obstacle Curse, also known as the Impediment Jinx, is described in textbooks as, casting the obstacle curse quickly can delay opponents or prevent a magical creature from moving for a short time. This spell is a crucial part of a dueling wizard's arsenal. However, when Anjuin actually cast the spell, he discovered that it essentially conjures an invisible barrier in the direction the caster is looking, like a magical wall. Its duration ranges from a few seconds to over a minute. By adjusting the magic output, this wall doesn't even have to be solid. The opponent can even pass through it, but their speed will be reduced accordingly. The degree of reduction depends on the density of the barrier. If a weakened obstacle curse is cast horizontally across the ground, it feels like walking through mud. But if the obstacle curse is manifested as a solid object, it can even be used as a defensive spell. It can also be propelled at the opponent using magic, turning it into a form of attack. Anjuin decided to put the obstacle curse into practice immediately, casting one in the open space of his room. First, I need to understand the nature of this spell, Anjuin said, walking towards the obstacle curse he had cast and touching it. He had conjured a solid, invisible wall. It feels very hard to the touch, and it's less than an inch wide. Impassable from either side. Anjuin brought his hands together until they touched the wall, roughly measuring its width. Let's test its physical defense strength first. Anjuin picked up a dumbbell from his luggage and knocked it against the invisible wall, producing a thud, thud sound. The sound doesn't have a metallic or stone-like quality. It's more like hitting the surface of water. Anjuin was amazed by the sound the spell made, which was different from what he had imagined. After hitting it hard several times, Anjuin put down the dumbbell and started using his bare hands, using his fists to feel the invisible wall. Thud, thud, thud. After several consecutive punches, the invisible wall began to change. The hardness is comparable to a normal stone wall, and the force feedback on my fist proves it. But why does it soften after being hit multiple times? It doesn't shatter like glass, but instead starts to soften. Is it because the magic within the wall is being consumed? Anjuin wondered, looking at his slightly red fist. After continuing to punch it a dozen more times, the now soft invisible wall was broken through. However, Anjuin discovered that even after being broken through, the spell still had an effect, just that it could no longer stop solid objects from passing through. It still had a buffering effect. Anjuin simply charged straight at it and slowly passed through the wall. It's like passing through a non-Newtonian fluid, except without the stickiness. What a magical spell! Anjuin felt the obstacle curse, but soon the spell's duration ended, and the entire wall disappeared into thin air. Anjuin pulled out his notebook and recorded the data and sensations from his experiment. Then, he cast another obstacle curse in the empty space. Next, let's test its magical defense. Anjuin came to a spot about 2 meters away from the conjured invisible wall and began casting attack spells at the wall, starting with Expelliarmus. As expected, the invisible wall blocked the spell. The light of the spell shattered and scattered upon hitting the wall, wandering along the transparent surface until it lost its magic and dissipated. Let's try different angles. Next, Anjuin tried shooting the wall with spells from various directions, even running to the other side to try different angles until the spell expired. There's a lot of information here. If a spell hits head-on and isn't strong enough, it will shatter directly. But if there's a certain angle, it will start to deflect. And spells from both sides can't penetrate. So, I can't cast an obstacle curse first and then stand safely on the other side to counterattack. Anjuin cast the obstacle curse several more times, testing its effectiveness for attacking. The obstacle curse feels a lot like a modified version of the mage hand from my previous life. It can be solidified in place, or it can be used to hit people by guiding it with magic. When it's ethereal, it can also slow down enemies. And calling it an obstacle is a bit of a misnomer, it's more like magic shaping. Anjuin summarized the characteristics of the spell while constructing the possible applications of the obstacle curse in his mind. Overall, Anjuin was very satisfied with this spell. It had a lot of potential. The next training will be divided into several parts: casting speed, positioning, strength control, shooting speed, or the speed of pushing the obstacle, and then trying to shape it freely. It seems like I'll have to undergo a period of intense special training. Anjuin began to arrange a new training plan and recorded his ideas about the spell, preparing to test and practice them individually. For the next 10 days, Anjuin spent every morning reading textbooks and learning new spells, and all afternoon practicing the obstacle curse. He also took the time during the day to go to Flourish and Blots and buy several books related to spells. He originally wanted to buy more, but books in the magical world were too expensive. The cheap ones cost several galleons, and the expensive ones cost a dozen or 20 galleons, more expensive than many alchemy tools and potions. Therefore, Anjuin only bought 3 books: Barnabas Finkley's 7 Methods of Spellcasting, The Origin of Spells, Introduction to Ancient Runes, and Elegant Steps in Dueling Competitions. This cost Anjuin 22 galleons, and there were several books that Anjuin liked but didn't buy because they were too expensive. Anjuin was now like a sponge, quickly absorbing all kinds of magical knowledge. His soul was inherently stronger than normal peers, and combined with years of targeted training, both his magic strength and total magic power far exceeded his peers, so his progress was rapid. One day in early August, in the evening. Bang! In the small courtyard behind the leaky cauldron, a target made of several chairs was smashed into pieces by a transparent cannonball. Anjuin slowly approached, raised his wand, and said to the fragments, "Reparo." The broken pieces of wood flew into the air and returned to their original state before being broken. Looks like the effect is good. The obstacle curse-shaped cannonball can now be reduced to the size of a wash basin, and the trajectory speed has gradually increased. The cast animation can be faster. Next, let's see if we can shape the fired magic bullet even smaller. Anjuin imagined that if he could reduce the obstacle curse cannonball to the size of a fist, that would be best. Then he could name this move Air Cannon. Chapter 11. Anjuin had performed similar spell casting exercises nearly 1,000 times. In terms of defense, Anjuin could now accurately position solidified invisible walls at any precise location. He was also skilled at casting low-density, deceleration-type obstacle curses. He had even developed a move called Obstacle Heavy Shield, which involved creating a transparent shield about a meter in diameter centered around his wand. This allowed him to maintain a certain level of defense even while moving, and he could control its activation and deactivation freely, without having to wait for the spell's duration to expire. Phew, that's enough for today. I might be able to master the obstacle curse completely after practicing for a while longer. I have a feeling it won't be long before I can cast it wandlessly, Anjuin said, wiping sweat from his forehead, quite satisfied with his progress. After making up his mind, Anjuin began to clean up the area. While he was halfway through, the wall in the courtyard suddenly cracked open. It turned out someone had opened the door to the leaky cauldron from Diagon Alley. A burly man, over 3 meters tall with a large beard, emerged from it, wearing a drab fur coat and with shoulder-length dark hair. As he stepped out, he resembled a giant, exuding immense pressure. "Mr. Hagrid, long time no see. What are you doing coming out of Diagon Alley like that?" Although the leaky cauldron wasn't doing great business, there were still some customers every day. Some Aurors on patrol, after finishing their shifts, would also choose to have a drink in the bar. Anjuin had been practicing magic in the courtyard frequently recently, so he had met some of them. Hagrid was one of them. Tom had introduced Hagrid as the keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts and the keeper of the Forbidden Forest. He would occasionally come to the bar for a drink or go to Diagon Alley to buy supplies for Hogwarts, or so Hagrid said. "Ah, Mr. Wilson, what are you always doing in the courtyard?" "I was going to bring a Muggle-born wizard who hadn't started school yet to buy school supplies, but then I found out their family isn't entirely Muggle. The little wizard's father is actually a squib. He's quite familiar with the wizarding world and has been to Diagon Alley before, so he didn't need me." Anjuin looked at Hagrid speechlessly. He had asked why he was coming out from there, not what he was doing. Anjuin had been practicing in the courtyard for an entire afternoon and hadn't seen a single person, and how could he stay inside for so long if he wasn't needed? Anjuin didn't pry and continued, "Is that so? Are you heading back to Hogwarts then?" "Haha, I came to Diagon Alley with the students' parents early this morning. I realized they didn't need my help, so I took a stroll through Nocturne Alley. Who knew I'd be wandering around until evening? I haven't even had lunch yet. I thought I'd have a meal and a drink here." In Anjuin's opinion, this Hagrid was a little too simple and honest. He had only chatted with him for a few sentences, and Hagrid had almost told him everything he had eaten for breakfast in the past few days. Anjuin had also finished his day's practice. He chatted with Hagrid casually and entered the leaky cauldron through the back door together. "Hagrid, what good stuff did you buy after wandering around all day? That's a big package." Anjuin noticed that Hagrid was also carrying a large package and asked curiously. "This is dragon liver I bought. I got a great deal today. Guess how much this whole pound of dragon liver cost?" "You'll never guess. You can't find anything this cheap anywhere else, haha." Hagrid happily showed off the great bargain he had found today, and Anjuin became even more curious when he heard it was dragon liver. "Dragon liver, is that the liver of a dragon? I've never seen it before. Can I take a look?" "Of course, my friend, no problem at all." Hagrid generously agreed to Anjuin's request and opened the package to show him. "Goodness, it looks as fresh as can be. What are you going to use it for? Are you going to make a potion?" Anjuin looked at the opened package. This was only a part of the whole dragon liver, but the color of the cut dragon liver was still very vibrant. "Haha, I'm going to go back and make it into pate to try," Hagrid said with a smile. "This stuff is edible." Anjuin looked at the dragon liver, poked it with his finger, and found that it was as fresh as if it had just been taken from an animal. Hagrid smiled, "Of course, I've eaten dragon meat before. But things are a bit chaotic now, and there aren't many people selling these things anymore, and even if they do, not everyone will buy them." Anjuin thought about it for a moment and felt that this stuff probably wasn't much different from lamb liver or pork liver. It's a waste to make it into pate. "Do you want to try other flavors? I'll show you my skills and stir-fry some dragon liver with scallions for you to try." Anjuin thought that if he followed the recipe for stir-fried pork liver with scallions, the taste should be similar. He also wanted to taste what dragon liver was like. "You're only 11 years old, right? Can you even cook?" "Anjuin's cooking is indeed good," Tom, the owner of the leaky cauldron, chimed in. "I've been eating his cooking every day for the past half-month. I even want to learn a few tricks from him. If he ever writes a magical cookbook, it will definitely be a bestseller." Since Anjuin had moved in, he hadn't charged him for meals, but the prerequisite was that he cooked for Tom. Speaking of magical cookbooks, Anjuin had also learned about them from Tom. In his opinion, it was actually similar to programming with spells. Then the reader could cast each spell according to the recipe to make dishes that were basically the same as those in the cookbook, which was very convenient. Tom had a few cookbooks, and Anjuin had read them. They were quite useful, but first, you had to learn many household spells, such as stirring charm, culinary cutting charm, timing charm, and so on. However, in the recipes Anjuin had read, the taste of many finished products was hard to describe. "Is that so? Then give it a try, Anjuin." Hagrid seemed very indifferent. To him, it was just something he bought at a low price anyway. Anjuin took the dragon liver into the kitchen. Holding it in his hand, he realized its uniqueness. According to Hagrid, it was left over from merchants in Nocturne Alley, and it had been piling up for a long time, so it was sold at a low price. But it still had residual warmth in his hand, and it had a unique fishy smell. Anjuin went back to his room and chopped a lot of the scallions he had grown, along with onions, ginger, soy sauce and cooking wine, and marinated them with the sliced dragon liver. Then he stir-fried them. Considering Hagrid's physique, he also made a few other side dishes and arranged them nicely on the table. Hagrid and Tom, who had been smelling the aroma all along, stared straight at the dishes in Anjuin's hands, as if they were treasures. After starting to eat, Hagrid's eyes lit up after just one bite, and he exclaimed how delicious it was. Anjuin also tasted it. The taste was not quite the same as pork liver or lamb liver. It was dense and chewy, and it even had a crispy texture. Hagrid, Tom, and Anjuin quickly devoured the entire table of dishes. Chapter 12. After a satisfying meal, the three of them sat chatting while digesting, inevitably discussing the mysterious man and the Death Eaters. "They're just a bunch of vipers hiding in corners, good for nothing but jumping out to bite you when you're off guard," Hagrid said, clearly disdainful of the mysterious man and his Death Eaters. "But it seems calm recently, and there hasn't been any news about the Death Eaters in the newspapers for a long time," Anjuin asked, looking at Hagrid's indignant expression. "Yes, those damned guys have gone into hiding again recently, but don't be careless, they must be brewing some new conspiracy, but we still have Dumbledore and the Order of the Phoenix. I believe we will win this war," Hagrid said firmly. "Isn't the Ministry of Magic also fighting against them? Why did Dumbledore have to form an Order of the Phoenix?" Anjuin still had doubts in his mind, because wouldn't the Ministry of Magic be suspicious of a private armed force like the Order of the Phoenix? War should still be organized by a regular army. Anjuin had also served in the military in his previous life, so he didn't think such a private armed organization was necessary. This book is first published on the entire network by Dot. The Dark Lord is very good at bewitching people, and the Ministry of Magic cannot be completely trusted, because there are many people inside who support the Dark Lord's ideas and serve him. "Who knows if there are any Death Eaters lurking inside," Hagrid said, then leaned over, with a mysterious expression, and whispered, "And many Aurors from the Ministry of Magic have also joined the Order of the Phoenix, just as Dumbledore said, we must use secrecy to fight against secrecy." Hagrid's eyebrows danced, and he explained to Anjuin with great enthusiasm, as if showing off something. "No, did you just tell me this kind of information so casually?" Seeing Hagrid spreading the information everywhere with such a big mouth, Anjuin suddenly felt very worried about their future. The two chatted in the leaky cauldron until very late. Hagrid saw that it was past curfew time, and hurriedly said goodbye to Anjuin and the others, preparing to return to school. "How are you going back?" Anjuin carried the oil lamp and sent Hagrid to Diagon Alley. He saw that the shops on the street were basically closed, and the shop providing Flow network services was also tightly closed. "At this time, I can go to Nocturne Alley. Borgin and Burke's there can provide Flow network services even very late." "Anjuin, that is a shop that specializes in selling dark magic items. Many of the items inside are very dangerous." Anjuin was very curious about the shop in Nocturne Alley that Hagrid introduced, and he felt very hot after eating the dragon liver. Diagon Alley has been very peaceful recently, so he decided to send Hagrid along the way and get some fresh air. Hagrid was also very carefree and happy that someone could chat with him on the road. The two of them entered Borgin and Burke's. The boss didn't know what he was busy with and wasn't at the counter. Anjuin looked around and felt that everything around him was very interesting. There were masks with terrifying expressions hanging on the wall, and a glass eyeball that kept staring at people, and a shriveled human hand placed on a cushion in a glass box. "Okay, Anjuin, you should go back quickly. Nocturne Alley is not a safe place. Don't touch the things here randomly. You don't know if there are any unknown curses on them." After saying that, Hagrid walked into the fireplace in the shop, grabbed a handful of Flow powder, and shouted Hogwarts in a loud voice, disappearing in a burst of green flames. "Isn't the boss here afraid that someone will steal something?" Anjuin looked around and found that there was no one in the shop at all, but he didn't dare to touch the things on the counter randomly. Walking out of Borgin and Burke's, Anjuin identified the direction and walked towards the exit. Suddenly, just as Anjuin was about to walk out of the alley where the shop was located, a blurry figure appeared out of thin air in front of him. Anjuin recognized that it was the effect of apparition. He was stunned for a moment, then frowned. It seemed that he had run into some trouble. But Anjuin reacted quickly. He quickly lowered his body and leaned against a pillar next to the alley. At this time, Anjuin was in the middle of the alley. This alley was located in Nocturne Alley, and both sides were connected to many shops in Nocturne Alley. There were many stone pillars that protruded halfway for hiding, and some boxes and wooden barrels were piled on both sides of the alley. Anjuin, who had lowered his body, hurriedly extinguished the oil lamp in his hand to avoid exposure. The person in front seemed to be chased by someone and ran into the alley. In a hurry, he also knocked over several wooden boxes. Maybe it was because of nervousness, he didn't notice that there was a person squatting by the road, quickly passed Anjuin and ran into the depths. Seeing this, Anjuin breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that he hadn't been discovered. He could leave safely after he left this alley. He didn't know whether this person was a friend or an enemy, so it was better to avoid exposure. Who knew that two black smokes suddenly fell from the air, revealing two figures wearing black robes and wearing skull masks. As soon as the two appeared, one of them raised his hand and shot a curse at the person in front. The person running away in front saw the people coming after him closely. He didn't continue to flee, as that would expose his back to the enemy. He took out his wand and flicked it, deflecting the oncoming curse to the side. With a bang, it turned out that a wooden barrel by the roadside was smashed by the curse, and wood chips splashed out. Next was a mutual shooting of spells between the two sides, like a lively game of ping-pong. The current situation was that the person who was running away was at the end of an alley, and two masked people were constantly launching attacks from a distance of more than 10 meters, while Anjuin was not far behind the two. Seeing this, Anjuin couldn't help but frown. It was really an unexpected disaster. It seemed that the peace and tranquility he had been experiencing recently had made him relax his vigilance. Plus, he had eaten some dragon meat, which made him feel hot and unsettled. After all, it was still wartime, and he shouldn't have run out for a stroll late at night. Even a fool could see that the two people who appeared later were Death Eaters. He didn't know whether the other side was an Auror or a member of the Order of the Phoenix. Anjuin took a few deep breaths to calm himself down again, thinking about how to resolve the trouble he had encountered. The battle between the two sides was still very glued, and they were launching spells while verbally attacking each other. Snivelis, don't think I can't recognize you just because you are wearing a mask. I can smell the stench on you from hundreds of meters away. The light of the spell illuminated the figures of both sides in the darkness. The person supporting alone had black hair that didn't reach his ears, a rebellious look on his face, and laughed loudly in the chaos. Sirius, you idiot, you still have the strength to talk, think about your last words, I won't let you run away this time. The person called Snivelis coldly taunted while desperately launching spells. Stop talking nonsense with him, quickly finish him off. The master is still waiting for us to report back. Another Death Eater next to him kept urging, and took 2 steps back, chanting words. It seemed that he was preparing a powerful spell, ready to take down Sirius in one fell swoop. Chapter 13. A good opportunity. Red Anjuin wouldn't just sit and wait for death. He didn't expect the two to just leave after finishing the fight. It was wishful thinking to hope that no one would notice him. Anjuin seized the opportunity, got up, raised his wand, and a impedimenta shot towards the person like an invisible cannonball. After casting this spell, Anjuin ducked and rushed straight towards the person behind Slug. Today, Avery and Snape finally tracked down Sirius Black. They followed him all the way to Nocturne Alley. He was originally preparing to gather strength and use a powerful curse to take down Sirius in one fell swoop, but he discovered a spell suddenly shooting from behind. Avery was startled. He didn't care about the curse he was charging up, hurriedly turned around, and desperately threw out a shield charm to block the incoming attack. Then, he reflexively cast a curse, but as his sight followed the curse flying away, he didn't see where the enemy was. After carefully scanning, he looked down and found a short figure had already ducked close to him. Anjuin lowered his body and rushed in front of Avery. He pushed off the ground with his left foot and swept his right leg horizontally, aiming a whip kick at Avery's right hand holding the wand. The strike hit. Avery's right wrist hurt, and the wand was kicked away. Avery was shocked and prepared to retreat and get closer to Snape. But before he could take 2 steps back, Anjuin pressed his advantage. After sweeping away the opponent's wand with his right leg, he turned around, changed to stepping forward with his right foot, and delivered a spinning kick with his left leg, hitting Avery's lower abdomen. Oof, Avery was kicked so hard that he almost vomited his dinner. His body couldn't help but curl forward. Anjuin's combo wasn't finished yet. After kicking this, he straightened up and took a heavy step forward with his left foot, hugged Avery's head with both hands, and thrust his right knee out, hitting Avery's face. Bang! Avery took this headbutt knee strike squarely on the face, blood splattering everywhere as he flew backward, collapsing to the ground unconscious. Anjuin's combo was completed in a flash. After finishing off this person, he immediately raised his hand and fired a compressed impedimenta, blasting towards Snape in front. Snape, who was still exchanging spells with Sirius, reacted at this moment. However, in this emergency, he still calmly waved his hand and deflected a curse shot by Sirius, then turned around and desperately cast a spell. Sectum Sempra. With a swoosh, a spell shot from Snape's wand. The two spells collided directly in the air. Anduin's impedimenta was cut in two like a watermelon by Snape's spell, and continued to fly towards Anduin with undiminished force. Anduin was shocked to see this. Such a fierce spell? So he used all his strength and cast another impedimenta, condensing it into a shield in front of him. But the shield still couldn't completely block this Sectum Sempra curse, and he could only watch as the shield was slowly cut open before his eyes. Seeing that the situation was not good, Anduin was about to roll to the side to dodge when a light suddenly flashed on his body. Another shield flashed out, blocking the attack for Anduin. A silver-white doe appeared on the shield. Snape saw that this attack was unsuccessful, and when he saw the magical shield formed by the doe standing in front of Anduin, his eyes flickered for a moment. He didn't continue to attack Anduin, but instead raised his hand and casually shot a spell at Sirius, then swooped towards Avery, and disapparated directly. Anduin breathed a sigh of relief. This was too scary. Is this the magic that adults use? If this mysterious shield hadn't suddenly appeared, he might have died. Anduin thought for a while and took out a copper plate from his coat pocket. It was a talisman given to him by Lily Potter. The luster on the copper plate was much dimmer. So it was this talisman that Lily gave me that saved me. I didn't expect this so-called talisman to actually protect me. While Anduin was lost in thought, Sirius, at the other end of the alley, saw that the danger had been resolved and hurried over, wanting to see who had saved him. Hey, little wizard, was it you who drove away Snape and Avery, those two Death Eaters? Sirius walked closer and saw that it was actually an underage wizard. I don't have that ability. I just took advantage of their carelessness to attack one of them. My name is Anduin, Anduin Wilson, Anduin said humbly, looking at the man in front of him. Ha, I'm Sirius Black. You can just call me Sirius. I must say, your skills are really good. I saw it all. You knocked that guy down with a few punches and kicks, Sirius laughed. Just luck. In the end, I was almost killed by that person you call Snape. If it weren't for this talisman that Lily gave me saving my life, Anduin hadn't fully recovered from the near-death experience. Lily? Are you talking about Lily Potter? You know Lily Potter? Sirius looked at the young man in front of him and was curious to find that he actually knew his good friend. Yes, I met her when I came to buy school supplies before. Mr. James, her lover, was also there at the time. She gave me such a valuable talisman the first time we met. I really don't know how to thank her, Anduin recalled the scene when he first met Lily. He didn't expect her to give him such a valuable gift casually. Haha, Lily is a very kind person. Her husband and I went to Hogwarts in the same year. They are my most trusted friends, Sirius said with a smile. I see. What a coincidence, Anduin smiled and said. Since you know them, then we're friends from now on. I'll just call you Anduin. And you just said you're preparing to enroll? Are you saying you're a new student who hasn't enrolled yet? Sirius was taken aback. He didn't expect a new wizard who hadn't enrolled yet to be able to take down a Death Eater alone. Looking at Anduin's figure, he thought he was a 3rd or 4th year student. Yes, I will be going to Hogwarts in a month. By the way, are you an Auror? How did you encounter Death Eaters? Anduin realized that he hadn't introduced himself after talking to the man in front of him for so long, so he quickly said. Although I'm not an Auror, I'm also a member of the fight against the Death Eaters. It's a pity that those two guys got away today, Sirius said regretfully. As Anduin and Sirius were talking to each other, several people suddenly appeared beside them. Chapter 14. Sirius, what's going on? There was a sudden magical reaction here, so I rushed over with my people. The leader leaned on a cane, his face scarred and repulsive, with a false eye like an eye patch, darting around, and asked, looking at the two figures, one large and one small, in front of him. Anduin looked at the suddenly appearing figure, knowing that they were likely Aurors. Coming so late, you guys are really something, he muttered to himself. Seeing the figure appear, Sirius led Anduin to meet them. They're two Death Eaters, I recognize them, it's Snape and Avery. Unfortunately, they're both wearing masks, so there's no way to accuse them. Those two bastards, I wasn't careful and they spotted me, and they chased me all the way to Nocturne Alley. Luckily, Anduin stepped in to help me, otherwise I might not have lasted until you arrived. After explaining, Sirius introduced both parties. This is Mad-Eye Moody, a veteran aura and hit wizard from the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. This is Anjuin Wilson, a young friend I just met. He's really good, gave that bastard Avery a good beating. By the way, he's a first-year student about to enroll at Hogwarts this year. Sirius introduced the two sides, and explained what had just happened to Moody. After listening to the story, Moody stared at Anjuin with his mismatched eyes. Kid, although what you did was brave, it's not up to a little wizard like you to show off. If something like this happens again, don't be so reckless. If you get hurt, your family will be sad. Mr. Moody, this won't happen again. If you guys could have arrived earlier, it wouldn't have been up to me, Anjuin thought speechlessly, but he still honestly admitted his mistake to Moody. He didn't want to argue with this guy who looked like Zhong Kui. Alright, I won't hold you accountable for casting spells outside of school this time. I'll ask Sirius about the specifics and follow up. Go home quickly, Frank, you're responsible for sending him back. Mad-Eye Moody acted properly and didn't make things difficult for Anjuin, calling Frank Longbottom to help send Anjuin home. Mr. Moody, I'm an orphan, I live in the Leaky Cauldron now, I can go back myself. What? Then let Frank take you anyway. Mad-Eye Moody re-examined Anjuin, and then realized why an underage wizard would be here. It turned out he lived in Diagon Alley. Seeing this, Anjuin indifferently followed Frank out of the alley. He really had terrible luck today, running into so many things. Anjuin, thank you, I'll come to see you when I have time. Sirius shouted at Anjuin, who was already far away. Shouting loudly in the middle of the night, aren't you afraid of disturbing other people's sleep? Anjuin turned around and waved at Sirius speechlessly. Returning to the Leaky Cauldron, Anjuin thanked Frank Longbottom for sending him back and returned to his room. The scenes of what happened today kept flashing in front of Anjuin. Death Eaters are too dangerous. What exactly was that spell Snape cast? Its penetrating power is so amazing, 2 barrier charms couldn't stop it. It seems that the practice of spells is not enough, the magic density of the barrier charm must be strengthened. Anjuin made up his mind, ready to be even tougher on himself, and would not leave the Leaky Cauldron again before school. He would just stay here and cultivate. After thinking about it, Anjuin took out the amulet again. Looking at the copper piece that had saved him, Anjuin planned to write to Lily tomorrow to thank her solemnly. In the following time, Anjuin was still very self-disciplined, and studied according to the existing plan. Anjuin had basically learned the primary spells and the spells in the Dark Arts Defense Primer, and now he had begun to look at the textbooks of Transfiguration, Herbology, and Potions. And the day after that night, Sirius came to visit Anjuin once, and also talked a lot about his grievances with the Death Eaters, and also talked about a lot of things about the Order of the Phoenix. It seems that many people in the wizarding world know about the Order of the Phoenix, but they don't know who is specifically in it, but Sirius is a well-known member of the Order of the Phoenix. No wonder he was targeted. In Anjuin's eyes, Sirius was a guy who loved to show off, was loyal, had a cheerful personality, but was a little pretentious, but Anjuin had a good impression of him. So, after a while, Anjuin became friends with Sirius, and the two began to correspond. And Anjuin's correspondence with Lily continued. After explaining the reason to Lily in the exchange of letters and thanking her, Lily was very happy that her alchemical gadget could help Anjuin, and in turn thanked Anjuin, because Sirius Black was also her good friend, and said that the amulet was actually an experimental work of hers, and she was very happy that it could work. Anjuin was very speechless about this. It was really something to take it out and give it away before knowing if it was useful. After that, he began to communicate with Lily about the working principle of the amulet. It should be known that the spell that could cut through 2 barrier charms could be resisted by the spell on this amulet, which made Anjuin very curious, and the desire for knowledge in his heart made him unable to help but explore the mystery. Lily generously explained the principle, but Anjuin could not fully understand it. He only knew that the amulet mainly included 2 rings. One was a stress response curse, which could be activated automatically in times of danger, and the other was a protective curse, which had Lily's own unique understanding. Lily said that she learned it from an old book in the school, which contained many methods of casting spells using emotions. Anjuin asked Lily about the name of the book, and planned to study it when he entered the school. And the correspondence with Sirius was not so frequent. At first, one day Anjuin suddenly received a package from Sirius, which directly stuffed 200 galleons, and said that this was a thank you gift for Anjuin. In the letter, Sirius said that although he could solve the two Death Eaters himself, he still expressed his gratitude to Anjuin for his help. Originally, Anjuin only had a good impression of this guy, but when he saw this, his impression of Sirius, this pretentious guy, greatly improved. This old brother is a rich man, it's okay to directly smash his face with money. Anjuin didn't really want to communicate with this guy, but thinking that he couldn't neglect this big guy, wouldn't he make a fortune if he leaked 3 melons and 2 dates from him one day? So occasionally he would still communicate with him and praise this narcissist, for which Anjuin had to endure Sirius's reply full of pretense and boasting. Chapter 15. Time passed day by day, and soon it was time for school. Anjuin was very satisfied with his gains during this time. After packing his luggage and saying goodbye to Tom, the owner of the leaky cauldron, Anjuin set off for King's Cross Station. After spending more than a month with Anjuin, Tom had developed a deep affection for him, and gave Anjuin a small bucket of butterbeer as a gift. Anjuin also left behind several recipes, all of which were simple and easy to learn, like fried chicken. Tom's eyes became even kinder when he looked at Anjuin. Anjuin arrived at King's Cross Station early, all alone with his luggage. He placed the luggage on a trolley one by one, and after checking that nothing was missing, he took out the ticket from his admission letter. Professor McGonagall had explained the precautions for taking the train to him before saying goodbye. Pushing his luggage, he came to the wall between Platform 9 and Platform 10. Anjuin noticed that there were many Aurors maintaining order around. It should be to prevent Muggles from accidentally entering and causing interference. Anjuin looked around, and after confirming that no one was paying attention to him, he pushed the trolley towards the wall. On the other side of the wall, a scarlet vintage steam engine was parked next to the platform. There were not many passengers yet, the train was scheduled to depart at 11 o'clock, and it was only a little after 9 o'clock now, so Anjuin had arrived very early. Pushing his luggage along the train, he casually found a carriage. With a wave of his small hand, all the luggage floated beside him, following him into the carriage. Finding an empty compartment, Anjuin opened the door and pointed his finger, and the luggage flew onto the luggage rack by itself. Shunfeng, wake up, Anjuin called out to his pet owl, only to find that his pet owl Shunfeng was still standing there dozing with its eyes narrowed. Anjuin shook his head, placed the owl cage on the table, and closed the door. Anjuin prepared to put on his wizard robes while there weren't many people around, then sat in a corner of the carriage, took out a copy of A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration and began to read it. In fact, he had read this book many times, and he had also tried transfiguration several times. In fact, he had the deepest grasp of charms and defense against the dark arts, and had learned many spells, while transfiguration, which required personal guidance from a teacher, was still in its early stages. After about an hour, the number of pedestrians on the platform outside the window gradually increased, and at this moment, the compartment door was knocked on. "Is anyone sitting here?" a girl asked, pointing to the seat opposite Anjuin. This girl looked young, with long brown hair and a pair of light green eyes that revealed some ignorance. "No, please sit down," Anjuin said with a smile. "I'm Anjuin Wilson, let me help you," Anjuin said kindly, watching the girl struggling to drag her suitcase, trying to lift it onto the luggage rack. Then Anjuin pointed his finger, and the girl's suitcase floated up and was placed smoothly on the luggage rack. "Cool, I'm Vivian Bulstrode. Are you an older student? You can cast spells without a wand. I'm a new student preparing to enroll this year." Vivian looked at Anjuin's move and subconsciously thought she had met a senior student. This was normal, Anjuin was already stronger than many of his peers, and his height was already around 1.5 meters, and his body was also very thick. "No, I'm also a new student, I'm just more proficient in this spell." Anjuin secretly told a lie. In the past few days, his impediment Jinx had also entered the ranks of nonverbal and wandless casting, but he didn't want to make himself too special. "You're really amazing. Are you from a pure blood family? I don't have any impression of the Wilson surname." Vivian tilted her head, looking like she was thinking seriously, but after a while, she still didn't gain anything. "My father and grandfather are both squibs, and my mother is a muggle. My grandfather was once expelled from the Bulstrode family. You don't know, my grandfather was overjoyed when he received the Hogwarts acceptance letter, because my relationship, our family was reincorporated into the Bulstrode family. I'm an orphan, and I have nothing to do with any pure blood families. I'm a wizard from a muggle family." Anjuin replied faintly, "Your family expelled your grandfather, don't you resent them?" Why are you so happy? You don't look like a muggle wizard at all. Vivian looked at Anjuin's so proficient levitation charm and couldn't imagine that Anjuin was actually from a muggle family. My grandfather hates his squib identity very much, and he also said that I am his pride. Isn't it a good thing to return to the family? The Bulstrode family is one of the 28 pure-blood families in the magical world. Anjuin couldn't understand the brain circuits of Vivian's family. Bloodlines were even more nonsense in his opinion. If he had been expelled from his former family, he wouldn't give them any good looks. Obviously, this girl named Vivian was also very proud of this identity, and told him, a stranger, so much as soon as she got on the train. Just then, there was a commotion on the platform outside the window, and many people gathered together. From a distance, it seemed that someone was arguing there. Do you know what happened over there, Vivian? Let me see. Vivian opened the window and stuck her head out of the window to observe from a distance. One side seems to be from the Traverse family, and the other side seems to be from the McKinnon family. I've seen them at family banquets. Vivian retracted her head, which was a little messy from the wind, and closed the window again. I heard that someone from the Traverse family is a Death Eater, and an Auror from the McKinnon family was seriously injured by that Death Eater from the Traverse family. The McKinnon family believes that the people from the Traverse family are all loyal to Volume. I mean the Dark Lord, but the people from the Traverse family all denied it, thinking it was the individual behavior of that Death Eater, and also said that they had mistaken the person, and that no one from the Traverse family was a Death Eater or anything. Chapter 16. The two looked at each other and continued to lie on the window, watching the excitement. Do you think they'll fight? Vivian asked Anjuin, never one to shy away from a spectacle. Probably not, didn't you see the Aurors are already there to maintain order? The gathering in front was quickly stopped by the Aurors who arrived after hearing the news, and the two sides who were arguing and seemed ready to fight were also separated. Ugh, I thought they were going to have a fight, but I didn't expect them to just exchange words, how boring. Vivian said, looking bored at the dispersing crowd. Anjuin looked at the girl, feeling like he was seeing the busybody aunties from his previous life, thinking the chaos in the world had nothing to do with them, just sitting aside quietly watching the show. Which house do you think will be sorted into? The Bulstrode family seems to always be sorted into Slytherin. I guess I will be too, Vivian asked listlessly. I don't really care, but if it's Ravenclaw, that would be the best. I heard Ravenclaw has its own separate library. Anjuin also knew a little about the various houses, he just wanted to study quietly. Haha, just by looking at you, I can tell Ravenclaw is perfect for you. I saw you reading as soon as you came in. I heard Ravenclaw students are all very smart. If you go to Slytherin, you have to be careful. The wizarding world is so chaotic now, I heard there are many people in Slytherin who worship the Dark Lord. Anjuin looked at Vivian and kindly reminded her. That's not necessarily true. In fact, many families from Slytherin take a neutral stance, like the Bulstrode family. Many of them don't think the Dark Lord will win in the end, Vivian said dismissively. Is it because of Dumbledore? I heard he's the greatest wizard of all time. Anjuin wasn't too interested in the attitude within Slytherin, after all, he was Muggle-born and almost certainly wouldn't be sorted into Slytherin. It's not just that. Our family had said that the Dark Lord's pure blood ideology is too extreme, wanting to eliminate wizards with Muggle blood. You know, many pure blood families have business dealings with Muggles, A&D. Vivian said mysteriously to Anjuin, and many pure blood families have actually had intermarriage with Muggles to some extent, otherwise those families wouldn't have been able to continue for so many years. Anjuin had thought about this before. After all, if there was always inbreeding, many newborns would have mental or physical defects. Don't say that in Slytherin, or they'll definitely cause trouble for you. Anjuin was speechless looking at the girl who was running her mouth. Don't worry, I'm not stupid. Just then, their conversation was quickly interrupted. A boy was knocking on the door. Hey, do you mind if I squeeze in? The boy scratched his head and asked with a smile. The other compartments are full. Of course not, there's plenty of space here. What's your name? I'm Anjuin Wilson, and this is Vivian Bulstrode. This compartment could originally seat 6 people, so sitting 3 people wouldn't be crowded at all. Charles, my name is Charles McKinnon. Charles smiled shyly. Charles was tall, possibly taller than Anjuin, but slightly thin. When Vivian heard Charles's name, she stared at Anjuin and winked at him, clearly indicating that this was the McKinnon family member she had just mentioned. Anjuan glanced at Vivian and helped Charles with his luggage. As soon as he sat down, Vivian started chatting with Charles non-stop. Fortunately, they were just chatting about casual topics. Anjuan was really afraid that Vivian would directly say, "Were you the one who almost started a fight outside?" He could imagine how awkward the atmosphere in this compartment would be. "Hey, have you heard? Minister for Magic Harold Mincham is about to step down. Everyone says that besides placing more and more Dementors around Azkaban, he hasn't been able to stop the Dark Lord from quickly gaining power. The Death Eaters have been getting more and more rampant recently. I heard they even attacked Sirius Black in Diagon Alley last month," Vivian said to the two, holding up a copy of the Daily Prophet. It was in Nocturne Alley, Anjuan complained weakly in his heart. He found that Vivian seemed to know a little about everything, her news was too well informed. She would be very suitable to be a gossip magazine reporter in the future. He should have been replaced long ago. Only passively defending will only increase more senseless casualties. Those damned Death Eaters are unscrupulous. Charles seemed to hate the Death Eaters very much. As soon as he talked about this, he completely lost his shyness and said with an angry face, "Don't worry, they won't be rampant for long." Although Anjuan didn't remember much of the plot of Harry Potter, he knew that Voldemort would die soon after Harry was born. Charles Mackinnon took Anjuan's words as just comforting himself, and replied with an awkward smile, "Our family has always been committed to fighting the Dark Lord, and several of them have joined the Aurors. Those Death Eaters attacked my uncle before, breaking his leg. He's still lying in St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries. He's very, very sure that one of the Death Eaters who attacked him was Traverse, but the Ministry of Magic didn't even investigate because they had no evidence. It's really hateful." Charles Mackinnon complained to Anjuan and Vivian about the Ministry of Magic and the Death Eaters with a lot of resentment. From this, Anjuan could also see that there should be different voices within the current Ministry of Magic, which led to the Ministry of Magic not fully fighting against Voldemort. It seemed that this change of Minister for Magic was also related to this. "That's terrible, your uncle saw the Death Eaters commit the crime with his own eyes and still couldn't arrest him," Vivian said with disbelief. "Many Death Eaters wear masks when they act, so sometimes even if you recognize who they are, there's nothing you can do," Anjuan explained to Vivian. After all, he had personally dealt with Death Eaters. Charles Mackinnon nodded after hearing Anjuan's words, but couldn't help but wonder how Anjuan knew so much. While the little kids were concerned about national affairs, the train officially started. "The train is finally moving, I heard it takes several hours to get there," Vivian began to mutter again. "Several hours?" Anjuan didn't understand why the magical world, with such convenient magic, still spent several hours on the road, and in such a backward way with a steam train, so he asked the two people next to him. Chapter 17. I heard that wizards used to go to school in their own ways. Some rode flying broomsticks, and some went directly to Hogsmeade via flow powder. However, since the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy was implemented in 1692, they were forced to stop because too many wizards were being exposed to muggles, which increased the Ministry of Magic's burden. Charles Mackinnon seemed to know this history well and began to talk about it incessantly. "So that's how it is. But how do you pass the time wasting several hours on the road?" "Reading?" Anjuan looked at his two companions and felt that it would be impolite to keep his head down reading and ignore them. "Hey, since we're going to spend so much time on the road anyway, how about I teach you guys a game?" Anjuan suggested to the two. "Sure, we're just idle anyway. What do you want to play, wizard's chess or gobstones?" Although Charles initially seemed cynical, he revealed his childish nature when he heard about playing games. "This is a game from the mysterious East. It's originally for 4 players, but it can actually be played with 3. I'll teach you." Anjuan took out mahjong tiles from his luggage and began to promote them to the two. Anjuan believed that they would not be able to resist the charm of mahjong. But now, what to do about the lack of a table? His transfiguration skills were very average, and he couldn't conjure up a table. "Got it." Anjuan looked at the side table in front of the window and cast an engorgement charm after pulling out his wand. The small table at the edge of the compartment instantly extended a section. "Okay, this will do." The mahjong Anjuan carried with him was a small set, about the size of Japanese mahjong, so a smaller table could barely work. The 3 of them sat around the table, and Anjuan began teaching. Because Anjuan had personally taught his friends in the orphanage how to play mahjong, he was very experienced in teaching the 2 of them, and he explained the rules clearly in a few words. These mahjong tiles were previously used to play with foreigners, and he was worried that they would not understand Chinese, so he bought internationally common mahjong, and even the edges of the wand tiles were marked with Arabic numerals, so there would be no problem of not understanding the content. The rules are roughly like this. It's okay, let's play 2 rounds first, and I'll teach you as we play. Sounds so complicated. Is it fun to play with these little squares? Vivian felt a headache after listening to Anjuan's explanation and couldn't help but complain. Anyway, we have a lot of time, let's try it. Charles felt it was interesting and persuaded Vivian. Charles found a suitcase about the same height as the chair and sat in the middle of the aisle, facing the table. Anjuan and Vivian sat on the chairs on both sides, and the 3 of them began to play mahjong under Anjuan's guidance. Under Anjuan's guidance, the 2 basically understood the basic gameplay of mahjong. In half an hour, Vivian had won 2 hands, and Charles had also won 1. Anjuan also intentionally let them win to deepen their understanding of mahjong. Haha, I won again. This game is so interesting. Vivian said happily while pushing her tiles, with no trace of her initial distressed look. How about this, let's have a competition. When the snack vendor comes by later, whoever has the lowest score at the end will treat. Charles was also having a great time and cheered on the side. That's how kids are, playing together slowly builds trust and familiarity. Okay, I feel like I'm on a roll right now. Vivian also echoed. Anjuan smiled inwardly. He had been letting them win just now, and now their tails were starting to wag. He would educate them and let them taste the beatdown of society. Then the 3 of them restacked the tiles and started a new round. After a while. Knock knock. There was a knock on the door. The 3 turned around and saw a middle-aged woman selling snacks, asking them. At this time, Anjuan's face was a little ugly, because he had been losing almost all the time for the past 2 rounds. It was really weird. Were these 2 really playing mahjong for the first time? How could they be so fierce? Could it be that I'm too bad at it? Anjuan couldn't help but slander in his heart. Especially Vivian, she was like she had suddenly opened the door to a new world, winning hands like crazy, and often catching Anjuan's discards, which made Anjuan a little regretful for teaching them how to play. Haha, Anjuan, hurry up, you lost the most, quickly treat us to snacks. Vivian's eyes narrowed into 2 crescents, and she called to Anjuan with a smile. I know, damn it, how is your luck so good? Anjuan reluctantly took out his wallet and bought every kind of snack. Then the 3 began to feast in the carriage. Try this, Bertie bought every flavor beans, they have all kinds of different flavors. Charles grabbed a handful of candy for Anjuan while biting on a licorice wand. Ew! Anjuan almost threw up after taking a bite. He tasted an earwax flavor. As for how to determine that it was earwax flavor, don't ask, just guess. Vivian and Charles laughed heartlessly at the sight. Anjuan didn't have the courage to try this kind of candy again and started eating chocolate frogs on the side. Among all the snacks, he could accept this kind of chocolate frog the most. The others were either too sweet or had strange flavors, like that Bertie bought every flavor beans. There was also a card inside, which introduced some famous wizards and their achievements. The one in Anjuan's hand was a picture of Hengist of Woodcroft, who was said to be the founder of Hogsmeade, the only all-wizarding village in Britain. Anjuan looked at the card and out the window, and couldn't help but look forward to the magical world even more. The 3 ate snacks and started chatting and joking again. Vivian was still talking nonsense, and still couldn't go 3 sentences without mentioning how her family was, how the people in her family were. Anjuan's ears were almost calloused from listening, but he still had to face it with a smile. Really, for a girl like Vivian, in Anjuan's view, people with high EQ would describe her as energetic, and people with low EQ would probably just call her a busybody. After becoming familiar with the 2, Charles gradually opened up. In addition to the resentment towards the Death Eaters being everywhere, the most he talked about was Quidditch. After learning that Anjuan and Vivian were not very familiar with the wizarding sport of Quidditch, he began to frequently introduce the rules of Quidditch to the 2, and he could recite the Quidditch teams and players of various countries like a treasure. Anjuan couldn't really understand why there would be barbaric sports like Quidditch in the magical world. Listening to Charles's introduction of various Quidditch fouls, and who was killed or crippled by the bludger in that game, he always felt that this magical world had some kind of inexplicable sense of division, on the one hand, the convenient application of magic, and on the other hand, all kinds of primitive and barbaric things. Chapter 18. The 3 of them chatted, ate snacks, and played cards, and time flew by unnoticed. In 5 minutes, the train will arrive at Hogwarts. Please leave your luggage on the train, and someone will be responsible for delivering it to the school. A voice sounded from the train's loudspeaker, indicating that Hogwarts was just around the corner. Good heavens, we're finally here. My back is numb from this long ride, Charles complained as he stood up and stretched. Anjuin packed his luggage, tidied up the mahjong tiles on the table, and put away the remaining snacks. The train gradually came to a halt, and the three of them stepped out of the carriage. The sky outside had already begun to darken. At the station, Hagrid was holding a lantern, waiting for the passengers, and shouting, "First years! First years, this way!" The crowd was drawn to the sound, and Anjuin and his companions slowly moved closer. "Hagrid, long time no see." "It's been a while," Anjuin said, approaching Hagrid to greet him. "Oh, Anjuin, it's good to see you. I heard about that terrible thing. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have that day." Hagrid lowered his head and saw that it was Anjuin. He had heard about what happened in Nocturne Alley that night from the Order of the Phoenix, and he began to apologize incoherently. Hagrid felt that it was all his fault that Anjuin, an underage wizard, had almost had an accident. "It's not your fault, Hagrid. It's all my fault for being careless. But I'm fine now, aren't I?" Anjuin interrupted Hagrid, not intending to continue the topic. He didn't want to cause any trouble before school even started. The scene at the station made him realize that many Death Eater's children also attended Hogwarts. He didn't know if the Death Eaters he had taken down that day had any relatives at the school who might seek revenge. Although he wasn't afraid of trouble, he wouldn't actively seek it out. "That's good, Anjuin. Thank goodness you're all right." Headmaster Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall also heard about what happened that night. "I was scolded terribly and haven't been allowed to go to Diagon Alley since then." "Heavens, you have no idea how guilty I feel," Hagrid said, clearly not understanding Anjuin's intention and continuing to talk to himself. "Can you relax now, Hagrid? I'm about to start school. Aren't you going to congratulate me?" Anjuin said, helplessly comforting Hagrid while steering the conversation away again. That night, Charles and Vivian heard their conversation and became curious. More and more first-year students gathered around them, and it wasn't convenient for them to ask directly. So, they suppressed their doubts, planning to find an opportunity to ask Anjuin what exciting things had happened to shock even this big guy. "Hey, big guy over there, what are you dawdling for? Hurry up and lead the way. This young master is exhausted from this journey. You're so big and brainless, are you stupid or something, leaving us standing here?" At this moment, a boy among the gathered first-year students directly ignored the two who were talking and shouted at Hagrid in a sarcastic tone. Anjuin felt a surge of displeasure in his heart at this rude shout and glanced back at the speaker. This underage wizard wasn't very tall, had a well-proportioned figure, short dark hair, and an arrogant look on his face at a young age, with deep, gloomy eyes. "What are you looking at? It's you and this big oaf wasting time talking. How dare you glare at me? Get out of here, Sampule Traverse. This is none of your business. If you want to die, I can help you." Charles charged out from behind Anjuin, pushed Traverse aside, and stood in front of Anjuin. "Who is it?" "It's the timid McKinnon's friend." "What's wrong, McKinnon? Why aren't you hiding behind the adults and crying like you were at the station?" Traverse made a surprised expression and mocked Charles. Upon seeing this, Charles was about to lose his temper and rush forward to teach this guy a lesson, but Anjuin stopped him. "Don't be easily provoked by words, Charles. He's doing it on purpose. Don't lower yourself to his level." Anjuin coldly glanced at the person named Sampule. From the beginning, he felt that something was wrong. This person inexplicably provoked him and spoke rudely. It seemed that he was targeting Charles because he saw him with Anjuin, deliberately trying to pick a fight. Just then, a burly figure suddenly stepped between the two of them. "Hagrid! Don't argue outside the school, or I have the right to send you home right now. In that case, you'll have to wait until next year to come to Hogwarts," Hagrid said unceremoniously, intimidating the confronting individuals, and his words were mainly directed at Sampule Traverse. "Humph, the McKinnons are all simple-minded. As long as you poke the fire a little, they'll jump right out. When he dares to make the first move in the crowd, I can make him look good. It's a pity that kid next to him and this big oaf are getting in the way," Sampule Traverse thought unhappily, while also glaring fiercely at Charles and Anjuin before stepping aside. That guy is called Sampule Traverse. He's from the Traverse family. I don't think Hogwarts should let that guy come to school. His whole family supports the Dark Lord. There must be Death Eaters in his family. This morning, our two families ran into each other at the station, and they even dared to make fun of my injured uncle. Disgusting, Charles said to Anjuin in a low voice, looking at Sampule Traverse with a hateful expression. Anjuin cursed his bad luck inwardly. This guy didn't seem like a good person. He encountered trouble on his first day of school, but he immediately shook his head, not wanting to think too much about it. If this guy didn't come looking for trouble, then so be it, but if he dared to provoke him, Anjuin wouldn't give him any good treatment. At the same time, Anjuin also noticed that even in school, during wartime, there were undercurrents. His previous idea of staying out of it was too naive. Don't pay attention to that guy. If you had rushed forward to attack him just now, you might have been criticized in public. Even if you weren't expelled, you might have been punished by the school. He just wanted to deliberately provoke your anger. You need to be more careful in the future, Anjuin comforted Charles and warned him. I was too impulsive. Thank you, Anjuin, Charles said, secretly relieved and grateful to Anjuin. Under the comfort of Anjuin and Vivian, Charles gradually calmed down. The three of them followed Hagrid's footsteps along a path, and gradually the group came to a lake. Across the lake, they could see a magnificent castle, which was Hogwarts. Chapter 19. Seeing that they were about to enter Hogwarts, everyone forgot the unpleasantness just now. Under Hagrid's guidance, the first-year students arrived at a landing on the lake. Everyone on board, remember that each boat cannot exceed 4 people, Hagrid shouted back at the freshmen. Anjuin, Charles, and Vivian boarded the same boat, and another girl joined them. Hey, I'm Oriana, hello everyone, the girl who shared the boat with them greeted. Hello, I'm Vivian, this is Anjuin and Charles. Ladies should just sit, let the 2 gentlemen help with the rowing. The glib-tongued Vivian took the lead in greeting Oriana, arranging work for the 2 men without consulting them. Anjuin and Charles exchanged speechless glances, and silently began to row. But soon Anjuin discovered that the boat seemed to be enchanted, and it would follow the route without much rowing. I heard that only first-year students have to row into the school. It is said to be for the freshmen to retrace the path of the 4 founders, and 4 people in each boat also represent the 4 founders. The gossipy girl Vivian began to talk about rumors she didn't know where she heard from. Anjuin listened while watching Hogwarts get closer and closer. I don't know what the founders were feeling when they approached the castle, but everyone on the boat was very excited now. All first-year students disembark and follow me. Hagrid carried the oil lamp and led the way. After the freshmen disembarked, they arrived at the first building of Hogwarts, the boathouse. After passing through the boathouse, there was a winding and long staircase, going up the cliff. Everyone struggled to climb up the stairs. After finally climbing to the top of the cliff, the huge castle standing on the cliff was Hogwarts. After climbing the cliff, a group of freshmen followed Hagrid to the entrance hall of Hogwarts. Upon entering the hall, a middle-aged witch in a dark green wizard robe was waiting for everyone on the steps. It was Professor McGonagall. Professor McGonagall saw the newly admitted underage wizards, and also saw Anjuin in the crowd, not forgetting to glare at him. Presumably his glorious deeds had reached Professor McGonagall. Professor McGonagall, I'll leave these little ones to you. After saying that, Hagrid turned and left. Thank you, Hagrid, thank you for your trouble. After Professor McGonagall exchanged a few polite words with Hagrid, she turned to the crowd and said, Welcome to Hogwarts. The opening banquet is about to begin, but before it begins, you will face the sorting ceremony. I will take you to the Great Hall later. Then Professor McGonagall introduced a bunch of precautions to all the freshmen under the steps. After listening for a long time, Anjuin found that the main content was 2 aspects, one was about the sorting, and the other was about the house cup. After being sorted into a house, you have to perform well, and good performance will add points, and poor performance will deduct points, which will affect the ownership of the house cup, blah blah blah. Professor McGonagall efficiently finished explaining, then glanced at the excited little wizards, smiled with satisfaction, and asked everyone to wait a while, then left first. The freshmen waiting under the steps were nervous and excited. They were nervous because they didn't know how to be sorted, and they were afraid that they would not pass the sorting ceremony. They were excited because they wanted to enter their own house as soon as possible and add points to the house. They all looked like they were ready to dedicate themselves to their house at any time. Anjuin rolled his eyes. What do a bunch of little kids know about honor? It's not like a gang fight where whoever wins wins. It is estimated that after the real start of school, these guys will know that house points are not so easy to earn, and it would be good if a bunch of naughty kids don't lose points for the house when they go wild. Anjuan, are you nervous? The sorting ceremony is about to begin, and I don't know how to sort. Will there be an exam? I've been playing all summer and don't know anything. Vivian was obviously very nervous, and then couldn't wait to pass this nervousness to Anjuan. Anjuan found it funny looking at her. You didn't spend the whole summer playing, you spent it gossiping about others, right? But he still quietly comforted her a few words. After a while, Professor McGonagall returned and led everyone to the Great Hall. The group came to the door between the entrance hall and the Great Hall. On both sides of the door were 4 huge hourglasses. Under the hourglasses were carved 4 animals: lions, eagles, badgers, and snakes. Currently, all the hourglasses were empty. It seemed that these 4 hourglasses were responsible for recording the scores of each house. Professor McGonagall reached out and pushed open the door, leading everyone into the Great Hall. The Great Hall of Hogwarts was very wide, and the height was also very exaggerated. I don't know if it was because of magic, but you couldn't see the top at a glance. Densely packed candles floated above, illuminating the entire hall. 4 exaggeratedly long tables were placed in the hall, and a large number of upper-class students were sitting at the tables looking at them. In front of the long tables was a chair, and on the chair was an old hat. When everyone came in, the hat was already singing the opening song in a discordant tune. When everyone came to the chair, the broken hat seemed to have not finished singing, and was still howling with relish. Anyway, in Anjuan's ears, it was almost like howling. It was simply the mother of Ugly opening the door for Ugly, ugly to the extreme. After a while, the sorting hat finally ended its performance in the applause of everyone. Then Professor McGonagall took a piece of parchment and walked to the chair and shouted, "Now the sorting ceremony begins, the little wizard whose name is called will come forward and sit on the chair." Oriana Sinclair, the girl who had just been on the boat with Anjuan and the others, was the first to be selected, and Oriana also sat on the chair with some trepidation. Professor McGonagall gently put the sorting hat on her head. "Ravenclaw." The sorting hat hesitated for a few seconds and quickly shouted. And Oriana walked to the Ravenclaw house table, which was cheering and applauding for her. Then the sorting ceremony began in an orderly manner. Vivian was assigned to Slytherin, as she had predicted. Although she was not a pure blood, her family had traditionally come from Slytherin. Charles was assigned to Gryffindor, which was about what Anjuan expected, and Sample Traverse was also assigned to Slytherin. Anjuan silently mourned for Vivian in his heart. It was not easy to be classmates with this kind of person. So the so-called sorting is so childish? Anjuan was still complaining in his heart, and Professor McGonagall on the stage had already read his name, Anjuan Wilson. Chapter 20. Anjuan walked to the front desk, sat on the chair, and allowed Professor McGonagall to put the hat on his head, but Anjuan's mind was filled with curiosity about the sorting hat. Serious and meticulous, full of a sense of honor, and filled with almost infinite thirst for knowledge, firm will and strong determination, simply a born Ravenclaw, but also pay attention to discipline, despise some unreasonable rules. Why are your thoughts so mature? You don't seem like a young child at all. It's really difficult. I've only encountered your situation once in the distant past. The sorting hat said softly on Anjuan's head. Can it actually see through people's thoughts? I wonder what this hat is made of, and what principle it operates on. I haven't seen such a strong anthropomorphic alchemy item before. I really want to take it apart and see. Anjuan looked at the hat on his head with great curiosity, his mind filled with academic questions about the hat. Hey, kid, put away your dirty thoughts. Anjuan was still thinking wildly when the sorting hat on his head began to warn him. Unfortunately, when you tell someone not to think about an elephant, that person will think of the elephant first. So the sorting hat's warning to Anjuan made Anjuan's imagination run wild. Oh, can it actually react to my thoughts? Are you a soul that has been placed in the hat? Or can someone really make such a rich personality prop? Anjuan became even more excited when he discovered that the sorting hat was talking to him. He couldn't help but touch the sorting hat with his hand, curious about what material the hat was made of. Good heavens, quickly put down your disgusting hand, and the dirty thoughts in your head. The sorting hat felt that the thoughts in Anjuan's mind were very dangerous, and after understanding the little wizard's thoughts and potential, it felt that this guy might really threaten his safety one day. Slytherin. The Sorting Hat obviously didn't like Anjuin and quickly shouted out Anjuin's house name. Professor McGonagall on the stage was obviously stunned for a moment, and Charles and Vivian in the audience were also surprised when they heard Anjuin's sorting. Although they hadn't known him for a long time, based on their understanding of Anjuin, they never thought that Anjuin might be sorted into Slytherin. But everything was a foregone conclusion. Anjuin's wizard robe began to change directly after the Sorting Hat shouted the house name. The edges of the robe changed into emerald green and silver patterns, and the Slytherin badge also appeared on his chest. Anjuin was also slightly stunned after hearing the Sorting Hat's sorting, but his expression quickly returned to calm. TCH, does this broken hat still hold grudges? Interesting. Anjuin curled his lips and glanced back at the Sorting Hat as he walked down the steps, and the Sorting Hat's anthropomorphic expression also glared fiercely at Anjuin. As for which house he was sorted into, Anjuin didn't really care, but subconsciously he didn't want to be sorted into Slytherin the most, because before entering school, he had heard from Sirius that many Death Eaters came from Slytherin, and the idea of pure blood supremacy was also very popular in Slytherin. Could it be that my subconscious thoughts were also captured by the Sorting Hat, so that Broken Hat retaliated by sorting me into Slytherin? How childish! Anjuin thought as he walked towards the Slytherin table, and the students at the table stood up to welcome the new student, wondering what they would do after they learned that the new student came from a Muggle family. Welcome Anjuin Wilson, I am the Slytherin prefect, Vanessa Greengrass. Vanessa Greengrass is a girl with long dark brown hair and brown eyes, currently in the 6th grade, and the overall feeling is polite and well-mannered. Hello, Prefect Greengrass, you can just call me Anjuin. Anjuin smiled slightly, shook hands with the female prefect in front of him, and then sat down next to Vivian. Good heavens, I didn't expect you to be sorted into Slytherin, I thought you would go to Ravenclaw. Vivian couldn't wait to exclaim to Anjuin when she saw him sit down. I don't care which house I'm sorted into, but I didn't expect to be hated by a broken hat as soon as I started school. Anjuin replied indifferently. What broken hat, what do you mean, are you talking about the Sorting Hat? Vivian asked puzzled. It's nothing, don't worry about it, let's wait for the sorting to end. Anjuin didn't continue chatting, but stopped directly. However, while Anjuin and Vivian were chatting, Traverse not far away on the same table glanced at Anjuin with a sneer, and then turned his head to chat with the people around him. What Traverse didn't notice was that Anjuin, not far away, also noticed him. Anjuin narrowed his eyes as he looked at Traverse, and then began to observe the other students in the same house. When entering a new environment, the first thing to do is to have a preliminary understanding, not only to know the names, but more importantly, the positions of these people. After all, the magical world is now in a time of war. Anjuin then asked Vanessa, who was sitting across from him, Prefect Greengrass, do you know if there are any Averys or Snapes in our house? There are no current students, but I have some impression of the two you mentioned, but they seem to be graduates who have graduated for several years. Why did you ask about these two? Vanessa looked at Anjuin suspiciously and asked puzzled. Oh, it's nothing, I just heard of their names before and asked casually. It seems that the two Death Eaters he had fought with before did not have any relatives attending school, and Anjuin couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. At this time, the sorting ceremony finally came to an end. After removing the Sorting Hat and the chair, an old man with a white beard walked out of the teacher's seat in the front row of the hall. Look, that's Dumbledore, known as the greatest wizard in the magical world today. Vivian excitedly introduced to Anjuin. At this time, Anjuin also finally had time to seriously examine this old man, the great wizard who had been leading the British magical world against Voldemort. But Anjuin observed for a long time, but he didn't feel that he was anything special, but rather like an ordinary old man next door. Dumbledore's speech on the stage was very fast, and he only said a few words in total. After a simple greeting, he returned to his seat. Okay, let the feast begin. Dumbledore returned to his seat, tapped the cup lightly with a spoon, and food suddenly appeared out of thin air in the plates on the table, piled up to the brim. All the little wizards cheered, grabbing the food in front of them and eating it in big gulps, regardless of etiquette. The Slytherin freshmen were amazed by this magical magic, and also excitedly grabbed the food directly, but Anjuin found that the older students around him were much more reserved, using cutlery to fork the food down and taste it slowly. Chapter 21. Anjuin also cut a piece of lamb chop and ate it slowly. Actually, he wasn't particularly hungry. He had eaten a lot of snacks in the car. He found that Hogwarts' cooking level was much higher than the outside world. Although it was as greasy as most British dishes, at least the seasoning was decent. The banquet hadn't been going on for long before various ghosts appeared one after another. Some fell from the sky, and some emerged from the tables, scaring the freshmen into exclaiming. Anjuin, however, looked at these ghosts with shining eyes. It was the first time he had seen the dead appear before him. He even curiously hugged a ghost passing by him, his hand passing through the ghost's body without any sensation. If only I could get a ghost to study, these things are rare. Anjuin began to have sinister thoughts again. In a way, Anjuin and Slytherin were quite compatible. The freshmen around him were also getting to know each other while enjoying the food. However, Anjuin found that this was indeed Slytherin. They immediately asked about family background and history. He also found that several freshmen discovered that they were relatives while chatting, and they began to recognize each other. Moreover, many freshmen already knew each other, probably like Vivian, whose families often visited each other. And Vivian even knew a few people, probably having met them this summer. The wizarding world is really small. Watching the Slytherin freshmen around him trying to get close to the acquaintances around them, he was like an invisible man, as if he was not affected in any way, silently eating the lamb chop on his plate. "Hi, friend, I'm Randall Rosier. Why are you eating here silently by yourself? You look very unfamiliar. I heard your name is Anjuin Wilson. I've never heard of the Wilson surname. Are you a descendant of some foreign wizarding family?" A boy suddenly sat down next to him, also a first-year freshman, with short light golden hair, chatting with Anjuin with a smile. "I am a descendant of the dragon. I'm afraid I'll scare you to death if I say it," Anjuin secretly complained in his heart, turned his head and glanced at him, recognizing that this person was sitting next to Traverse just now. Anjuin estimated that this kid was probably arranged by Sample Traverse to find out the truth. "No, I am not a descendant of any foreign wizarding family. It's normal if you haven't heard of it, because I am a wizard from a Muggle family. Is there a problem?" Anjuin's tone was indifferent, without any emotion, looking at Randall with emotionless eyes. Randall was sized up by Anjuin's cold gaze, and his originally smiling expression became a little stiff. When the surrounding little wizards heard that Anjuin was actually a wizard from a Muggle family, they all turned their heads to look at him, and then turned their heads to discuss with their partners, sharing the news about Anjuin. "You know, very few wizards from Muggle families are assigned to Slytherin." Some little wizards looked at Anjuin with curious eyes, while others looked at him with less friendly eyes. Anjuin felt that Traverse and Rosier's behavior was very childish, and he didn't care about the strange gazes of the surrounding students. In his eyes, these freshmen were just a bunch of kids, and Anjuin had no interest in integrating into their family atmosphere. He just wanted to study and research quietly, and it would be best if no one with bad eyes disturbed him. However, Anjuin had learned from Vivian before that some of Slytherin were half-blood wizards from famous families, and some were purely pure-blood wizards. It was inevitable that something bad would happen when a Muggle wizard like Anjuin fell in, so Anjuin secretly made up his mind that strength is the most important thing, and he must prioritize mastering self-protection methods in a short time. After all, the current situation in the wizarding world is still in turmoil, and it is inevitable that some little wizards who admire the Dark Lord will regard him as a target. After Randall Rosier came to inquire about information, he was stared at by Anjuin and felt uneasy. He sat back next to Traverse again, and the two whispered to each other. After Traverse heard the information Randall had learned, he smiled coldly. He also looked up at Anjuin, only to find that Anjuin was also looking at him. The deep, watery eyes made Traverse feel cold all over. After a hum, he stopped paying attention to Anjuin. The surrounding people slowly calmed down. After all, it was impossible to talk about family background in this public place. And the prefect Vanessa also stopped a few of the loudest people with her eyes. Anjuin smiled slightly at Vanessa to express his gratitude, and then enjoyed the quiet and started eating again. Before figuring out the situation, Anjuin planned to be honest and lie low first. Soon, the dinner came to an end. Professor Dumbledore once again stepped onto the stage to explain some precautions to all the students. Students were not allowed to go to the Forbidden Forest, and they should not get close to the edge of the school. The situation was currently sensitive, and many Aurors were arranged around Hogwarts to patrol around the campus. "It's my favorite time again. Before everyone finishes dinner, let's sing the school song together." Dumbledore waved his wand, and golden ribbons transformed into lyrics floating in the air. All the teachers and students stood up and sang the school song in their own tunes. Anjuin mixed in, unable to find the tune at all, and sang along blindly. In Anjuin's opinion, it was too out of tune to sing each other like this. All the teachers and students were singing with constipated expressions, and only Dumbledore was intoxicated, which made Anjuin have some new views on this great wizard Dumbledore. Everyone endured the school song time, and Professor McGonagall arranged for the prefects to lead the students back to their respective dormitories. The Slytherin common room and dormitory are in the dungeons of Hogwarts Castle, located under the Black Lake. The crowd left the banquet hall, turned around several corners, passed through several staircases, and came to a wall. Serpensortia. The other fifth-year Slytherin prefect spoke the password, and a stone door would appear on the stone wall, leading to the common room. Entering the Slytherin common room, the first thing that comes into view is a long, low dungeon corridor. Round, glowing green lamps are chained and hung from the ceiling. At the end, below 7 steps is an open activity space. There are carved chairs for students to rest, and some skulls are used as decorations. Part of the dungeon extends to the bottom of the lake, and the scenery of the bottom of the lake can be seen directly from the ceiling and windows, so the room has a green tone. The walls and ceiling here are made of rough stone, and a pile of fire is burning under an exquisitely carved mantelpiece. Nevertheless, the common room still appears dark and cold. Chapter 22. I am your prefect, Vanessa Greengrass. The password to enter the common room changes every 2 weeks. The current password is Ouroboros. New passwords will be announced on the bulletin board. Vanessa explained the Slytherin rules to the new students as she saw that all the students had entered. At the same time, she stood on the steps leading to the common room, looking at all the underage wizards of all grades. Here at Hogwarts, we are Slytherin. We do not reject ambition, but we still remain calm, elegant, and uphold honor at all times. I hope you can all defend the honor of Slytherin. Our house hasn't won the House Cup for several years. I hope you don't just bicker with those Gryffindors all day long, but put more time into your studies and the honor of the house. Vanessa said calmly, looking at the students in the common room. This book is first published on the entire network by Dot. The Slytherin snakes stood quietly at the bottom of the steps, listening to Vanessa's speech, with different expressions. It was unknown how many people would actually listen, but at this moment, a discordant voice came. We can't let those Gryffindor fools ride on our heads. Now is a good time for our rise. Look at the magical world now, the world is about to change. A fifth-year student with blonde hair, also standing on the steps, protested loudly to Vanessa. That's Rory Yaxley, the fifth-year prefect, who was just promoted to prefect this year. Vivian whispered the information she had learned to Anjuin. Enough, don't bring that off-campus stuff to the school. You come to Hogwarts to study, not to take sides. Vanessa sternly reprimanded Rory, not giving him a chance to finish speaking. Okay, everyone, disperse. Your luggage is in your rooms, and your schedules have been placed on your desks in advance. Your names are on the doors of your rooms, so go back to your rooms now. Vanessa turned around and dismissed the crowd, and then told the new students, not giving Rory more time to speak. Humph, we are born noble. Slytherin has a responsibility to maintain the purity of the magical world. I heard that there are even Muggle-born wizards joining the school now. Look, under your leadership, what nobility is left in Slytherin? Rory roared at Vanessa, venting his dissatisfaction. The young wizards didn't dare to interrupt, and scattered in 2s and 3s. Anjuin, listening to Rory's veiled accusations, had no intention of listening to his nonsense, and left along the corridor beside the common room. It seems that there are different voices in Slytherin. One side is like the neutral party, unwilling to get involved in the Dark Lord's affairs, while the other side is the pure-blood faction, believing that the Dark Lord can win. Anjuin thought as he walked, and finally found his room. Since the Slytherin dormitory was converted from a dungeon, each cell is a dormitory, which means that in Slytherin, everyone can have their own single room. From this point of view, Anjuin was very satisfied with being assigned to Slytherin. Entering the room, what came into view was a luxuriously decorated 4-poster bed, surrounded by polished stone walls. 2 windows could directly see the scenery at the bottom of the lake. The room was decorated with emerald green and silver fabrics. There were candles and oil lamps on the desk and bedside table for lighting. The medieval tapestries hanging on the walls depicted famous adventures of the Slytherin descendants. There's even a carpet. As far as decoration is concerned, there's nothing to complain about this room. Although the things he had seen and heard after entering Slytherin did not give him a particularly strong sense of belonging to this house, As far as the room was concerned, Anjuin had no complaints about being assigned to Slytherin. Anjuin packed his luggage, while thinking about future arrangements and plans, and after a little thought, he had a plan. Next, I must act in a low-key manner. Training and exercise must continue. Slytherins are good at protecting themselves. I can't expect to rely on others, nor can I expect those pure-blood supremacists not to make trouble for me. Although everything in the magical world is very tempting, I must still focus on ensuring safety and prioritize arming myself to build superior firepower. Anjuin's military mindset made him define all unknowns as dangerous. Gradually, Anjuin's eyes were no longer as humble as before, and gradually became firm and sharp. The next day, at 6 o'clock in the morning, Anjuin stretched. Hogwarts' course schedule is 2 consecutive classes from 9 am to 11 am, with a break in between when the bell rings, and then lunch. After lunch, classes continue from 1 p.m., also 2 consecutive classes. Dinner is still eaten in the Great Hall. Then, the students return to their respective common rooms, either to do homework or to socialize. The curfew time for upperclassmen can be extended to 9 p.m. Today is Tuesday. According to the course schedule, the 2 classes in the morning are charms, and in the afternoon there is history of magic. Anjuin dressed neatly and prepared to stroll around the castle in advance to understand the terrain and the location of the classrooms. After checking the wand on his body, he opened the door and walked out. There was no one in the common room in the early morning. Through the ceiling, you could see a huge squid swimming in the lake. Anjuin now had time to quietly observe the entire common room. It must be said that the person who built the common room was truly a powerful and aesthetic person, and the scenery at the bottom of the lake was even more eye-opening. After Anjuin admired it, he walked out of the Slytherin dormitory along the corridor he had entered. Anjuin first spent more than 2 hours walking through all the routes of the castle. Those randomly moving stairs almost made him dizzy. Later, Anjuin simply used the obstacle curse to directly shape a magic staircase and jump directly to each floor. Hogwarts Castle has a huge main tower, with a total of 8 floors, composed of moving stairs. The top floor is the headmaster's office, a courtyard-like building connected to several other towers. The main tower and courtyard building mostly contain classrooms for various grades and subjects, while the other towers connected to the main tower have 2 that are the Ravenclaw and Gryffindor common rooms. There is a drawbridge in the courtyard building, and you can reach the astronomy tower through the drawbridge. The other towers next to it are the central tower, the dark tower, and the clock tower. Several towers are connected by another courtyard-style high-rise building. You can reach the library through the corridor of the building, and the central courtyard is in the middle of the building. Along the corridor, passing the library and the central courtyard, there is a gate downstairs, which leads to several huge greenhouses. Passing the greenhouses along the corridor to the bottom of the central tower, there are 2 more bridges here, one stone bridge connecting the courtyard building on the side of the main tower, and the other leading to the entrance hall. Chapter 23. Anjuin walked around the entire castle, returning to the Great Hall from the entrance hall. He noticed that some people were already having breakfast, and feeling hungry himself, he joined them. Anjuin, I thought you hadn't gotten up yet. I didn't expect to find you here. I was waiting for you in the common room this morning, Vivian said as she entered from the doorway just as Anjuin sat down. Seeing that he was already there, she walked over with a look of resentment. Sorry, I woke up very early this morning, so you didn't see me. You don't have to worry about me in the mornings anymore, I'm used to waking up early, Anjuin explained to Vivian with a slightly apologetic expression. I won't wait for you anymore. What if you run off early and can't find your way back? Luckily, our common room is directly above the Great Hall. Otherwise, I might not be able to find this place in such a large castle, Vivian said, jumping from one topic to another. Don't worry, I've already walked around the castle. I've also found the classrooms where we'll be having lessons. Just follow me later, Anjuin said before lowering his head to eat his breakfast quickly. As they were chatting, a flock of owls suddenly flew into the hall, dropping letters. Anjuin received several letters from Lily, Sirius, and Tom. The letters were mostly congratulating Anjuin on his admission, while Sirius was anxiously asking which house Anjuin had been sorted into and whether it was Gryffindor. That's going to disappoint you. If Sirius finds out I was sorted into Slytherin, would that guy break off our friendship? Anjuin thought wryly. Afterward, Anjuin put away the letters and went to Charm's class with Vivian. Upon entering the classroom, Anjuin discovered that they were having class with Gryffindor, which he found very puzzling. He knew that Slytherin and Gryffindor had a deep conflict, which even affected the lower year students after the sorting ceremony. Inside the classroom, Anjuin saw Charles, wearing his Gryffindor robes, already sitting in his seat waiting. Anjuin and Charles exchanged a glance and nodded to each other, before Anjuin found a seat on the other side. Soon after, the bell rang for class to begin. The charms professor, Phileas Flitwick, was short in stature and said to be a human-goblin hybrid. During class, he even needed to stand on a pile of books so that the students could see him clearly. And so, Anjuin's first class at Hogwarts began. In Anjuin's opinion, the charms class taught very basic things. Only a dozen simple spells were taught in a year. In the first class, charms professor Phileas Flitwick mainly explained the basic principles of charms without even getting into the spell casting part, which greatly reduced Anjuin's interest in the class. He had essentially already mastered all the first-year spells. Anjuin barely listened during the entire class. Instead, he took out parchment and began replying to the letters from his friends. In his letter to Tom, he simply exchanged basic greetings and reported that he was safe. In his letters to Lily and Sirius, in addition to greetings, he also told them about being sorted into Slytherin and gave a general introduction to what he had seen and heard after entering Slytherin, expressing his worries about his future and hoping that the two graduated seniors could give him some advice. After carefully writing the letters, Anjuin noticed that Professor Flitwick had finally finished explaining the magic theories, and the second class finally began with spell casting instruction. The first spell they learned was the levitation charm, which Anjuin was most familiar with. Professor Flitwick spent a lot of time explaining the hand movements and incantation, and then began to have everyone practice, trying to cast the spell on a feather to make it float. The young wizards around him began practicing the spell. Most people couldn't even make the feather move an inch after reciting the incantation for the first time. Wingardium Leviosa, Wingardium Leviosa. Vivian recited the incantation with an inaccurate accent, frantically waving her wand at the feather. She even turned red in the face. Anjuin rolled his eyes. Did this girl put all her talent into gossip? Professor Flitwick demonstrated so clearly, yet she still mispronounced the incantation. On the other side, Sampule Traverse managed to make the feather float after a few tries. Although it was shaking as if it would fall at any moment, he smiled triumphantly at the people around him after seeing his success. Anjuin saw that Professor Flitwick had already walked down from the podium and was looking around. Not wanting to slack off too obviously, he had to take out his wand and gently point it at the feather as the professor approached. The feather floated steadily in front of the wand, not moving at all. Crap, forgot to chant. Because Anjuin was so familiar with this spell, he cast it habitually, without any hand movements or incantation. Excellent levitation charm, Mr. Wilson. This levitation charm is cast very well. Professor Flitwick didn't seem to notice that Anjuin hadn't chanted, and walked straight over, praising his levitation charm. Slytherin gains 2 points. This is almost the perfect casting of the levitation charm. Everyone, follow Mr. Wilson's example. Everyone in the classroom raised their heads to look at Flitwick and Anjuin, and many young wizards showed envious eyes towards Anjuin's spell casting. Of course, some people's eyes were not so friendly. Anjuin awkwardly accepted Flitwick's praise because he hadn't used any hand movements or incantation this time. He wondered if anyone had noticed. Did you not chant just now? Vivian brought her head close to Anjuin and whispered. SHH, Anjuin hushed Vivian, telling her not to speak out loud. Anjuin didn't want to be too different in class, knowing that the more obvious the target, the more dangerous it was. It seemed that Professor Flitwick really hadn't noticed Anjuin's trick, and continued to patrol, correcting and guiding the other students' hand movements and incantations. Anjuin also gave up on pretending to practice and turned to teach Vivian. After Anjuin corrected Vivian's hand movements and incantation errors, Vivian finally cast a fairly complete levitation charm before the end of class. Alright, that's all for today's class. Everyone go back and write a 6-inch essay about the levitation charm. Then Professor Flitwick paused and added. Mr. Anjuin Wilson, please stay behind for a moment. As expected, he didn't escape the professor's eyes. Anjuin signaled Vivian not to wait for him and remained alone in the classroom. Chapter 24. Professor, Anjuin was about to speak, but was immediately interrupted by Professor Flitwick. Mr. Wilson, if I'm not mistaken, was that silent casting? Professor Flitwick asked with a slight smile, his eyes as deep as water. He was discovered after all. Yes Professor, you can just call me Anjuin. Anjuin replied softly, facing Professor Flitwick with a hint of reserve. Based on what he had seen yesterday, it was difficult to distinguish the positions of different people. In the current situation, the cautious Anjuin could not be sure who could be trusted. Don't be nervous, Anjuin. Professor Flitwick walked to Anjuin's side and gently waved his wand. 2 chairs floated over. The professor took the lead in sitting on one and gestured for Anjuin to sit down as well. Anjuin, I can tell that your spell wasn't released by accident. Like I said, it was a near-perfect spell. Even many adult wizards can't do it as calmly as you. Professor Flitwick saw that Anjuin seemed a little restrained, so he changed the subject. Don't be nervous, Anjuin. How about this, can we talk about my class? What do you think of attending my charms class? Professor Flitwick said gently. Under Anjuin's observation, he didn't feel any hostility from Professor Flitwick, so he gradually relaxed. Well, your lectures are very good. Your explanation of the theory of spells is profound and simple, and very. Anjuin was about to give the professor a rainbow fart, but he was immediately interrupted by Professor Flitwick. It seems you listened very carefully. Then you still had time to write letters in the first class, and you still had time to daydream and slack off during spell practice. Flitwick teased Anjuin with a chuckle. It's over, all his actions were seen by the professor. Anjuin was instantly embarrassed and could only show an awkward smile. I've heard of you, Anjuin, even before you enrolled. Although I didn't join the Order of the Phoenix, Professor McGonagall also mentioned to me your feat before enrollment. That's really not simple, and Lily is one of my most proud students. Although she didn't mention it much, she also expressed her appreciation for you in her letters to me. After exposing Anjuin's flattery, Professor Flitwick did not reprimand him, but chatted with Anjuin about his family. So he was one of his own. Anjuin suddenly realized that he was scaring himself, and his expression became even more awkward. Sorry Professor, I shouldn't have been distracted in your class. I didn't mean to disrespect you. After learning about their connection, Anjuin sincerely apologized to Flitwick. No need to apologize, I can see that you are not nervous now. Then I still have to ask the question just now, what do you think of my class? Flitwick shook his head gently and asked Anjuin again with a smile. Actually, your lectures are indeed very good, but, to be honest, they are a bit too superficial for me. Anjuin decided to tell the truth. I actually studied the theory of spells and most of the spells before enrolling. I have actually mastered all the first-year spells. Professor Flitwick's eyes suddenly lit up after hearing Anjuin's words. Sure enough, the moment I saw you cast the spell, I realized that your level far exceeded other little wizards of the same age. Flitwick stroked his white beard and continued, do you know why I value your spell level so much? Why? Because I am good, of course. Anjuin couldn't say such a shameless thing, so he could only shake his head. Because you are abnormal. Flitwick said. You are the abnormal one? Is it abnormal to know a lot of spells? Is this professor normal at all? Anjuin slandered in his heart, not understanding what Professor Flitwick meant. Flitwick looked at Anjuin and continued, do you know why I would say that? Anjuin shook his head. That's actually related to the growth process of a wizard. When a newborn is born, it's actually impossible to tell whether they have magical talent at the beginning. It's not until the little wizard grows to a certain age, until the little wizard experiences a magical surge. Some little wizards will experience it as early as 6 years old, and some may not start until 10 years old. That's how it proves whether a wizard has magical ability. You should have experienced the same process, right? Professor Flitwick looked at Anjuin as he spoke. Anjuin nodded after hearing this. Indeed, he began to feel his abnormality around the age of 7. Many self-proclaimed pure-blood families claim that their children showed magical abilities at the age of 3, and they also say that that is the sign of pure-blood family wizards. That's pure nonsense. Flitwick did not forget to mock the pure-blood families when he talked about them, and then continued. After the magical surge, it is proof that they have the potential to become a wizard, but it does not mean that they can start casting spells just because they have the potential to become a wizard. The reason is that after a little wizard experiences a magical surge, their body will enter a rapid growth period, both physically and magically. That will make the wizard's magic chaotic and extremely difficult to control. That's why Hogwarts chooses to enroll you after you are 11 years old. Flitwick explained. Chaotic and surging magic cannot be mastered by a little wizard at will. At the same time, as the little wizard continues to grow, the wizard's magic will become stronger and more chaotic. If they don't learn and guide it, they may even hurt themselves and the people around them at any time. Your learning and guidance actually began the moment you had a wand. At this moment, Flitwick was like a kind and patient elder, explaining the origin of magic to Anjuin. Wand. Anjuin suddenly remembered that after he had a wand before, the magic in his body did produce a wonderful change. That's right, the wand is a great invention for wizards. The wand has the function of stabilizing and sorting out magic. After you have your first wand, the magic in your body will be subtly affected. Chaotic magic will tend to stabilize. This greatly reduces the danger of casting spells. You must know that in the era before wands, casting spells was very dangerous. During the casting process, the magic in the body might go out of control at any time. In ancient times, many wizards died under their own magic. Flitwick said seriously. However, the wand will also slightly reduce the little wizard's sensitivity to magic. Many little wizards can easily use some small tricks without a wand, but after having a wand, it becomes difficult. That's why we let little wizards buy wands before enrolling. Even pure blood families will not let their little wizards use wands in advance before going to school. Magic sensitivity is also an important condition for measuring a wizard's ability. Chapter 25. Similarly, the incantations and casting motions of spells are the same. Accurate movements and incantations allow wizards with decreased sensitivity to master spells more quickly and easily. You must know that in the era when wizards did not have wands, silent and wandless casting was the norm. Read. Flitwick cleared his throat, inevitably feeling a little parched after explaining so much. I see, Anjuin recalled his years of self-training and hard work. This not only made his total magic power stronger than others, but it seemed that his magic sensitivity was also far beyond that of normal people because of his cultivation. Good, you see, almost all the young wizards today have a lot of difficulty when casting spells, because their sensitivity to magic has decreased. Compared with the occasional release of small tricks in the past, this actually forms a perception gap. So the initial spell learning is very important. If you don't pay attention, it may even make the young wizards feel that it is more and more difficult to cast spells, and even produce pessimistic emotions, and emotions are also a crucial part of spell release. Some talented wizards can indeed quickly learn 1 or 2 spells after just getting their wands, but that also requires a gradual process. As they grow older, wizards' magic storage, control over magic, and sensitivity to magic will gradually increase, until the wizard is in their 30s. So for wizards, learning and releasing spells will become easier and easier. Therefore, if you can only skillfully use a few spells, it's nothing, but when you say that you have mastered all the spells of the first year and can stably and skillfully perform silent casting, then it proves that you are very abnormal. So, can you tell me, old man? This is very important for the academic research of wizarding spell development. I hope you can understand my curiosity. Professor Flitwick asked Anjuin in a very sincere tone. In fact, he also knew that it was very rude to casually explore other people's secrets, but his love for spells made him shamelessly ask Anjuin. Although he was very old, he still had a very strong desire for knowledge of the unknown. Anjuin thought for a while, feeling that Professor Flitwick was very sincere, and also explained so much knowledge about spells to him, which actually solved many of his long-standing doubts, and this was not a big secret for him. Thank you, Professor Flitwick. In fact, the reason why I can cast silently so early may not be as complicated as you believe. It is actually related to my childhood experiences. Anjuin believed that Professor Flitwick was trustworthy, so he carefully told Professor Flitwick what he could say. And Professor Flitwick listened carefully. You may not know, but I am actually an orphan. The experience in the orphanage since I was a child made me understand the independent life very early. When I was about 7 years old, I found that some abnormal phenomena began to appear around me. That should be the magic surge you mentioned. Objects around me sometimes suddenly fly into the air. Anjuin said while confirming to Flitwick. Professor Flitwick nodded accordingly. At that time, I was extremely scared, but I was in the Muggle world at that time, and no one could tell me what it meant, so I kept the secret while starting to study the abnormal ability in detail. I found that I was indeed different. At that time, I actually thought I had, what Muggles call superpowers. At that time, I was nervous and excited, so I began to explore the unusual power in my body. I started learning how to control it. It was very difficult at first, but curiosity made me very patient. Thinking about me at that time, sometimes I even feel a little incredible. At that time, I would stare at a cup all day long, trying to mobilize the ability in my body, I mean magic. At that time, I didn't have the concept of magic. Anjuin's eyes seemed to see himself again in those years, and he said lightly. Professor Flitwick also raised his eyebrows and nodded. He didn't expect that the young man in front of him had such a special experience. Persistence is often fruitful. I have forgotten exactly how many times I practiced. Finally, one day, I may have vaguely sensed magic and actually moved the cup in front of my eyes. I tried to remember that feeling, followed by constant attempts and practice. I think about it, this kind of practice has not stopped until I received the Hogwarts admission letter. Then, in Professor Flitwick's stunned expression, Anjuin waved his hand gently, and the basic book in front of him floated quietly in the air. My God, this is silent wandless casting. Flitwick stared at Anjuin with shining eyes. But Anjuin had not finished his words. In the long years of practice, the release of magic has become more and more comfortable, and I have also tried to deepen my control over magic through weight-bearing training and delayed training. I think it is in the continuous training process that I have become more sensitive to magic, as you said. Later, I received the Hogwarts admission notice. Professor McGonagall took me to buy my first wand, and I, who was very curious about the magical world, couldn't wait to teach myself magic. At the beginning, I really felt that my sensitivity to magic had decreased as you said. Casting spells with a wand, especially the levitation charm, became very smooth and stable, but there were indeed some discomfort when leaving the wand or not chanting spells, but perhaps my years of training made me more sensitive to magic than others, and my control was stronger. After many practices, I can make objects float without a wand. Anjuin told Professor Flitwick what he could tell. He didn't want to tell the truth about things like martial arts and meditation, because it was difficult to explain how he learned it. Then, I felt very comfortable learning other spells, but in fact, only the levitation charm can achieve silent and wandless casting. In fact, there is also the impediment jinx, but he is not going to say this. After listening to Anjuin's experience, Professor Flitwick felt both incredible and reasonable. There is no shortcut, only hard work. At the same time, he had a trace of admiration for the young wizard in front of him. Oh, Anjuin, you were simply born to be a Ravenclaw student. How could the Sorting Hat put you in Slytherin? Professor Flitwick sighed with regret. Because that broken hat is petty, Anjuin secretly complained. Chapter 26. Good heavens, your experiences have truly opened my eyes, further reinforcing my belief that there are no shortcuts on the path of magic, and that diligent practice will surely be rewarded. Professor Flitwick was so excited he almost jumped up and down, his resolve to delve into magic strengthened after hearing Anjuin's experiences. I agree with that view, Professor Flitwick. In fact, I'm not satisfied with my current level. I earnestly hope to receive more guidance from you. I've already mastered most of the first-year material, and I'm eager to advance further. Seeing the professor's excitement, Anjuin thought he might as well seize the opportunity to ask for a little something. Indeed, I wouldn't say anything to discourage ambition. An insatiable thirst for knowledge is a wizard's greatest asset. Professor Flitwick nodded approvingly, then added. If you wish to study advanced spells, you can go to the upper year charms classroom. The bookshelves there contain many old books left behind by older students. Furthermore, I'll write you a suitable reading list, which you can use to borrow books from the library. And if you encounter any difficulties while learning spells, you can always come to me, and I'll personally answer your questions. After speaking, Professor Flitwick paused to consider, then continued. I'd like to invite you to join my charm study club. Although I've never invited a first-year student before, you can start by observing. I believe you'll be able to keep up. You should know that Lily performed exceptionally well in my charm study club back in the day. Flitwick, perhaps carried away by his excitement, was practically treating Anjuin as if he were a student from his own house. Thank you very much, Professor Flitwick. I appreciate your recognition and admiration, Anjuin said gratefully, bowing slightly to the professor as he sincerely expressed his thanks. Keep it up, Anjuin, maintain your persistence and effort, and your future will be limitless. Flitwick exclaimed, looking at the young wizard, who was taller than him. Anjuin concluded his conversation with Professor Flitwick, and, with the professor's reading list and club invitation in hand, he happily left the charms classroom. To have such a rewarding experience on the first day of school was truly unimaginable. First, I'll follow Professor Flitwick's advice and search for some upper-year textbooks in the upper-year classroom. After all, one must take things one step at a time, and not be too eager for quick success. After making his plans, Anjuin headed to the Great Hall, ate a quick lunch, and then began wandering through the various upper-year classrooms. Alohomora. Anjuin cast the unlocking charm at a 5th-year charms classroom. He had already searched classrooms from several year levels and had reaped great rewards, with each classroom storage cabinets containing some old textbooks. Some of these were incomplete, and Anjuin even found textbooks that had been burned, leaving only half of the original. After prioritizing the more or less complete books, Anjuin would browse through their contents. Some textbooks were missing a few pages, which Anjuin guessed might have been torn out by mischievous young wizards to make paper airplanes. The complete textbooks were all different, with some containing dense notes, many of which Anjuin found to be insightful, making them much more valuable than blank textbooks. Anjuin thoroughly searched the remaining 6-year level classrooms and found 7 valuable textbooks. Why 7? Because 2 textbooks from the 6th-year classroom contained very rich notes, with differing content, but both of which Anjuin found very valuable. He even found Lily Evans' Charms textbook in the 5th-year classroom, which recorded many of Lily's understandings of charms. Most importantly, Anjuin discovered many records about defensive magic in it. Perhaps Lily already had the idea of a patroness at this time. This made Anjuin treasure the book, and after collecting all the books, he realized that it was almost time for afternoon classes, so Anjuin went to the History of Magic classroom with the books in his arms. Anjuin discovered that at Hogwarts, the classroom arrangements for each subject varied greatly. For example, the 7 core subjects of charms, potions, transfiguration, and defense against the dark arts each had independent classrooms for each year level, while herbology was mostly taught in greenhouses, astronomy in the astronomy tower, and history of magic, which Anjuin had originally thought would have 1 classroom per year level, only had 1 classroom. He then understood why, as the history of magic professor, Cuthbert Binns, was actually a ghost. It's said that many years ago, when Professor Binns was still alive, he fell asleep in front of the fireplace in the staff lounge. When he woke up and rushed to class, he forgot to bring his body with him. As a result, he died that night, but this small problem didn't stop him from continuing his teaching career. Rumor has it that he didn't even notice he was dead. Vivian told Anjuin about the rumors she had heard from somewhere, but Anjuin thought it was very likely to be true. Looking at the ghost professor on the podium lecturing on the recent history of the magical world, Anjuin was thoughtful. It seems that after becoming a ghost, memories don't just stay in life, because the history the professor is explaining now clearly happened after his death. However, Anjuin's interest in this course may only extend this far, because Professor Binns' class was incredibly boring, and almost all the young wizards below the stage were drowsy. Vivian, on the other hand, was very energetic and listened carefully. Therefore, Anjuin generously started to slack off, directly opening a 2nd-year textbook he had just found and reading it with relish. Anjuin walked along the corridor to the library and found Madame Pants, borrowing all 6 books on Flitwick's reading list, and took them back to his room along with the 7 old textbooks. He planned to retreat and practice directly for a period of time, mastering these books. Anjuin's priority was still the upper-year textbooks. After all, mastering the basic required content first would make the foundation more solid. He found that the teaching content in the textbooks from grades 3-6 was very rich in both quality and quantity, while the content of grade 7 was small in quantity but very profound in quality. It is said that in grade 7, students can choose to graduate or intern early, and the remaining wizards can choose the ultimate wizard exam. Most of the content in the textbook is related to it, including the teaching content of apparition. 2 days passed, and Anjuin, who had found a treasure, spent almost all his time studying spells except for classes. Chapter 27. But tonight, Anjuin had dressed up and prepared to go out because he was heading to Professor Flitwick's Charms Club. Following the address on Professor Flitwick's invitation, Anjuin arrived in front of a tapestry on the 8th floor of the main tower. It was said that the meeting place was arranged here mainly because it was close to Headmaster Ravenclaw's office. Password. The knight on the tapestry asked Anjuin. Unicorn, Anjuin said, reading the password from the invitation. As you wish. The knight on the tapestry nodded and opened the door. The interior of the room was arranged like an ordinary classroom, but the walls on both sides were filled with bookshelves, making it more like a library. There were more than a dozen velvet tables and chairs, and the blue carpet and curtains were very Ravenclaw in style. There were already quite a few people waiting inside, chatting softly with each other. "Anjuin, what are you doing here?" Vanessa was very surprised to see Anjuin here. She was invited to join the club in her third year, and she was very proud of it because no one had ever joined in the first year, and almost no one in the second year. Being invited by Professor Flitwick in the third year was already highly regarded. "This isn't a place where you can just come in. Leave quickly before the professor arrives, lest you get him angry and cause trouble." For a moment, Vanessa thought Anjuin had accidentally entered, following behind a member, and quickly warned him. Anjuin was slightly stunned when he saw that it was Vanessa, but then he immediately smiled and said, "Prefect Greengrass, you've misunderstood. Professor Flitwick invited me to join the Charms Club." Anjuin smiled and took out the Charms Club invitation given by Professor Flitwick, waving it in front of Vanessa. Vanessa saw that Anjuin did indeed have an invitation, but she still felt that something was wrong. Generally speaking, first and second years were still doing basic studies, so how could anyone join this club just a few days after entering school? Then Vanessa whispered to Anjuin, "Maybe Professor Flitwick has a special purpose, but this is not a relaxed class where you just need to listen to lectures. Here, you need to complete the assignments given by the professor, sometimes participate in academic discussions, and even assist the professor in some research work." "Don't worry, senior," Anjuin interrupted Vanessa softly. "The professor has already explained the specific matters of the club to me beforehand. Believe me, I won't hold you back." Beforehand, Anjuin had already learned about some situations in the Charms Club from Professor Flitwick. Specifically, this was a small research group, and the relationship between students and professors was like that of graduate students and supervisors. Professor Flitwick actually divided the teaching and research difficulty for students into 3 levels. The first level is the content learned by ordinary students, the second level is when students in the 5th grade achieve an E or O and are accepted into Professor Flitwick's Charms Advancement class, which also exists in other subjects, and the third level is the Charms Club he founded. People who can appear here are generally those whose charms talent is highly recognized by the professor, and here they often have to study and research some content that deviates from the school exams. Vanessa could see that Anjuin was very calm, so she didn't say anything more, just took Anjuin to find a seat and wait. Before long, Professor Flitwick also entered the room. Seeing Anjuin join on time, he smiled at him and said, "Anjuin, I'm very happy to see you. That conversation with you gave me a lot of inspiration and ideas." The people in the room were very curious when they saw the professor enthusiastically talking to a low-grade wizard as soon as he came in, and they all turned their heads to look at Anjuin. Anjuin never liked to be too high profile, especially when surrounded by seniors who were at least 2 grades higher than him, but seeing Professor Flitwick's enthusiasm, he could only get up and greet the professor. "Hello, Professor, it's my honor. Your teachings have also answered many of my questions." Flitwick nodded with a smile, then walked to the podium in front of the room, sat on his specially made high-legged chair, looked around, and said, "It seems everyone has arrived on time. Now we will start the first gathering of this academic year's Charms Club. First, let's welcome the new members, Hufflepuff 4th year student, Shirley Runster." Shirley, who was called, stood up and nodded slightly to everyone, and applause rang out around her. Next is Ravenclaw 5th year student, Quirinus Quirrell. Quirinus Quirrell was obviously a little nervous, wringing his hands uneasily on his thighs, and stood up somewhat restrainedly to greet the students around him, and everyone gave him encouraging applause. Finally, I would like to introduce, Slytherin 1st year student, Anjuin Wilson. After hearing the introduction of the previous 2, Anjuin finally understood why Vanessa thought it was impossible for him to appear here. 2 4th and 5th year students had just been invited to join, but there was no point in thinking about these things now, so he could only get up and nod to everyone. Everyone around looked at Anjuin in surprise. A 1st year student? Doesn't that mean he just entered school a few days ago? Is this Professor Flitwick's own son? For a moment, the seniors around were briefly stunned, and even forgot to applaud. It was Professor Flitwick who took the lead in applauding, and everyone around him reacted, suppressing the curiosity in their hearts and applauding. After the introduction, Professor Flitwick quickly entered a working state, without explaining anything to everyone. He cleared his throat and said to everyone, "Today is the first gathering of this academic year. I hope the new little wizards can get into the state faster. Now I will announce the research topics for this academic year." Then the professor took out his wand and tapped lightly in the air, and words quickly appeared on the whiteboard next to his seat. First, silent spells, research direction of rapid mastery techniques or methods for silent spells. Second, wandless magic, how to achieve wandless magic from scratch. Third, development and research of temperature control spells. Fourth, development ideas and application directions of sound wave spells. Fifth, interpret the formation of magic spells from ancient runes, and the evolution process of magic spells in various countries. Sixth, find high-quality materials and extreme value data tests for carrying undetectable extension charms, continue the research from previous years. The current best material is Goblin Urim steel, and 37 secondary high-quality materials. Seventh, quantification of magic sensitivity and improvement techniques. Chapter 28. Anjuin looked at the topics appearing on the whiteboard, which immediately aroused his strong interest. At first, Anjuin thought that this club would be like attending a charms class, except that the content would be deeper. The so-called research would be professors guiding students to replicate some existing research results. But it turned out to be more like a research institute, directly conducting expansionary research on unknown topics. He saw that the seventh research topic was about magical sensitivity, which was obviously a topic that the professor had just added. The results of this research could even affect the magical world. Magical sensitivity? Can such an abstract concept be researched? Vanessa, who was next to him, frowned in confusion as she looked at the newly appeared research topic. Anyway, she didn't plan to choose this kind of topic to research. Anjuin knew why the professor was interested in this topic, but he wouldn't tell others. The above are the research topics for this academic year. As in the past, topics with results will be removed from the whiteboard, and those without actual results will remain. I will also add new research directions. Now, everyone, start choosing your research directions. You must choose at least one. You can choose multiple research topics if you want. Find your own information and report your research results once a week. Professor Flitwick changed his patience when teaching in the first-year classroom and efficiently assigned tasks to everyone. The young wizards around him took out parchment and began to record the topics they were interested in. Anjuin did the same, but he recorded all of them, preparing to screen them after returning. At the same time, Anjuin discovered that Professor Flitwick was letting everyone conduct independent research. In Anjuin's opinion, this arrangement was too inefficient. If it were him, he would divide the research into groups according to the research topics. It would be significantly faster to break through the research topics as a group. But as a first-year student who was not yet familiar with the environment, he would not dare to make wild claims here. Okay, I believe everyone has taken notes. Research items 1, 2, 5, and 6 are long-term research projects that have been going on for many years. It may be difficult to achieve breakthrough results, but even results that can enrich the material library are very valuable. Items 3, 4, and 7 are new topics added this year, especially item 7, which is the inspiration I recently obtained. I hope everyone can achieve breakthrough achievements in related directions. Professor Flitwick glanced at Anjuin intentionally or unintentionally while speaking, and then continued. The topic selection work for this year will be conducted here first. Next, let us congratulate Vanessa Greengrass on the successful publication of her article in the Century Charms Journal. As far as I know, her article has been praised by many scholars. Professor Flitwick looked at Vanessa with a happy expression. After that, everyone also gave her warm applause. Century Charms is the most well-known wizarding academic journal in the current wizarding world. The journal's Today's Transfiguration, which represents transfiguration, and Multifarious Potions, which represents potions, are also highly respected by wizarding scholars from various countries. It is a very rare achievement to have an article published in it. Everyone around her cast envious glances at Vanessa. Vanessa's cheeks were slightly red as she got up and nodded to everyone and the professor. Anjuin didn't expect his senior to be an academic expert. At the same time, he heard about the academic journal Century Charms for the first time, and he wondered if he should subscribe to some. Okay, next, let's study this multifunctional application of the banishing charm together. In the description of this paper, Vanessa combines the banishing charm with alchemical props that have been applied with the undetectable extension charm to achieve large-scale engineering operations. At the same time, there are also techniques for accurately using the banishing charm on targeted objects, such as independently banishing moisture in the air. In the case of large-scale spell casting, it can even affect the weather. Next, Professor Flitwick pulled down a curtain similar to a slide projection screen behind him, using magic to project the content of the paper on it, and analyzed the spell casting techniques and application prospects in detail with everyone. At the same time, he also asked Vanessa to assist in the explanation. Vanessa stood on the stage like she was participating in a thesis defense, telling everyone about the original intention of studying the banishing charm and what problems occurred during the research process, and demonstrated the corresponding spell casting techniques to everyone. Professor Flitwick first cast a spell in the center of the classroom, releasing a cloud of white smoke, and then used his wand to count the ink bottles, using ink to create a cloud of dark fog. He mixed the two clouds of fog together. To increase the difficulty, he kept stirring the large cloud of fog, making it difficult to distinguish each other. At this time, Vanessa stepped forward and cast a banishing charm in the middle of the fog through exquisite spell casting. After a while, the fog changed. The fog that was originally dyed light black gradually faded, and soon it completely turned into the original white fog. In front of Vanessa's wand, a cloud of dark ink floated, which had clearly been banished from the fog. Vanessa completed this operation with a hint of shyness and a bit of pride, and everyone around her applauded Vanessa warmly again. Anjuin also applauded Vanessa when he saw this excellent spell casting. He didn't expect Senior Vanessa to have such excellent spell casting skills. This directional banishing technique can be applied to ink that has turned into smoke and dust, and it must be easier for larger objects. What an excellent performance, great job, Senior. Anjuin looked at Vanessa, who came down and sent his sincere congratulations. Vanessa also said with a slightly proud expression, "Thank you, Anjuin, study hard here, I believe you will be able to catch up with me one day." Anjuin smiled noncommittally. It was undeniable that this spell casting technique was indeed very valuable and promising. Just now, Anjuin thought of several application methods. Simple ones are like water pumps, which can be used for engineering operations. In medicine, it can also be used in surgery, such as banishing foreign objects from the body, etc. It is also the same when applied to combat. If you can banish the opponent's blood and bones in battle, it would be too powerful. Next was the free study time. Anjuin stared carefully at the curtain, learning the banishing charm and the directional banishing technique developed by Vanessa. However, he soon denied his previous usage in combat because after research, he found that the banishing charm was more practical for casting spells on inanimate objects and non-living bodies. If you cast spells on living beings like humans, you must be basically incapacitated before you can cast spells successfully, otherwise the spell casting will be interrupted as long as the other party moves slightly. Chapter 29. Unfortunately, it seems the idea of extracting enemies' flesh and blood was a bit naive. However, after a moment, Anjuin had a new idea. Just because you can't directly cast spells on the human body in battle doesn't mean this spell is useless. If you cast the spell on the ground where the enemy is standing, extracting the soil beneath their feet, it would not only affect their balance but also immediately create a trap that hinders their movement. And perhaps, it could also. Anjuin stared at Vanessa's thesis, lost in thought, completely immersed in the ocean of academics. In a way, Anjuin was a pure scholar, although his research often strayed into combat tactics. His years of military service in his previous life, as well as his identity as a martial artist, made him think of whether something could be used as a weapon or had tactical or strategic significance whenever he encountered it. Flitwick smiled with satisfaction as he watched Anjuin's earnest contemplation. Diligent students always win the favor of professors. Time passed quickly, and the club gathering came to an end. All the students left the room in an orderly fashion. Anjuin also followed Vanessa back to the Slytherin common room. Upperclassmen's curfew could be delayed until 9 p.m., but low-grade wizards like Anjuin were not allowed to wander around the castle after 8 p.m. Therefore, Vanessa kindly took him along the way to avoid being caught by Filch. Anjuin gained a lot from today's Charms Club trip. After returning to the dormitory, he was still studying the content about the extraction curse. He felt particularly satisfied to have mastered the spell in advance and to have more practical casting techniques, as the extraction curse could only be learned after the 4th year. The next day, during potions class. Perfect, very excellent. I didn't expect Anjuin and Vivian's group to be able to make a qualified calming draft on their first potion brewing attempt. Potions Professor Horace Slughorn looked at the potion brewed by Anjuin's group and praised them without reservation, especially since the cauldrons of other students nearby were either emitting foul-smelling black smoke or even burning. Vivian, hearing the professor's praise, could only smile awkwardly, because she had almost entirely watched from the sidelines during this potion brewing process. Vivian's role throughout the process was to hand things over. For example, Anjuin would call out powdered asphodel root, and then Vivian would be responsible for handing it to him. Once, Vivian even handed the wrong material. If Anjuin hadn't checked it after receiving it, this potion would have been ruined by this strong spectator. Anjuin calmly accepted Professor Slughorn's praise, nodding slightly to express his gratitude to the professor. Brewing potions, a process that requires standardized procedures and techniques, is very simple for Anjuin. The recipes clearly mark all the procedures and material standards. All he has to do is follow the recipe. Moreover, he discovered that potion brewing is actually no different from cooking. The key lies in the fact that the material preparation must meet the standards, and the cutting, grinding, soaking, and other processes require a high degree of precision. Anjuin's hands were very steady. During the potion's production, he was like a human-shaped machine, able to cut materials that perfectly met the standard size, put in the materials at the specified time, stir at the specified time, and maintain different heat levels at different times, everything as if it was a natural process. Brewing potions is actually similar to making soup. Anjuin thought silently. The difficulty actually lies in the materials. The same materials have different qualities. Like the same raisins, some are dried very thoroughly, while others still retain a lot of moisture. These are actually the key elements that determine the quality of the finished product. Although it was only his first time making potions, Anjuin still summarized a lot of information. The potions textbook mostly describes the properties of semi-finished materials, what problems will occur in potion making if substandard materials are used, and how to solve them, etc. Although potions wasn't as fascinating to him as charms, the process of brewing potions could keep his mind calm and focused, so Anjuin also developed a high interest in potions. There should be a lot of old textbooks in the potions classrooms of each grade. I can take some time to scavenge them. Anjuin couldn't help but have some bad ideas. He had recently visited the upper grade classrooms for defense against the dark arts and transfiguration and collected a lot of old textbooks. Damn it, is it just brewing a pot of broken potion? What's there to be so cocky about? Sample Traverse stirred the boiling black bubbles in the soup with a stirring rod. Obviously, this pot of potion had been ruined by him, and he said bad things about Anjuin to Randall Rosier beside him fiercely. All right, Traverse, that guy won't be able to pretend for long, but let's not go looking for trouble with him now. That woman Vanessa is still watching. Randall helplessly looked at the stinky pot of soup and whispered to Traverse. Humph, that damn woman Vanessa has abandoned the nobility of Slytherin. Traverse complained hatefully, that guy Anjuin better not get in our way, or I won't let him off. After saying that, Traverse stopped looking at Anjuin and turned to look unkindly in the direction of the Gryffindor house in the distance. Charles over there had also ruined a pot of potion and was frantically wiping the potion overflowing from the pot with his partner. My father and the others complained before that the McKinnon family always got in our way. I heard that the aunt of that Charles over there also joined the Order of the Phoenix. As a pure-blood family, they still have to protect those lowly muggle wizards. Last time, we crippled one of their family members, and they still don't know to repent. There is a limit to our mercy. Traverse sneered at Rosier. Are you crazy? Don't say that here. Rosier looked at the resentful Traverse and warned in a low voice nervously. What are you afraid of? Dumbledore is old and can't stop us. When the Dark Lord defeats Dumbledore and breaks through the Ministry of Magic, the future will belong to our pure-blood families. Let's find some time to clean up that idiot from the McKinnon family. Traverse said to Rosier in a sinister manner. Rosier looked around and, after discovering that no one was paying attention to this side, whispered, What are you going to do? I heard that Senior Yaxley is preparing. SHH. Don't say that here. We'll talk about the specifics when we get back. Traverse glared at Rosier. Weren't you the one who started saying it first? Rosier glanced at Traverse with a slightly innocent expression and muttered in a low voice. Chapter 30. Meanwhile, on Anjuin's side, Professor Slughorn prepared several glass potion bottles for him, allowing him to take his finished products with him, and once again encouraged him, adding 10 house points to Slytherin. After all, he was a student from his own house, and the professor would show appropriate favoritism. Read the latest chapters on Book 69. After class, Anjuin, carrying 5 bottles of the prepared calming draught, took out 2 bottles to share with Vivian, as they had completed the potion together. No way, Anjuin, these potions are all your credit. I feel like I didn't help at all, Vivian refused, feeling embarrassed to accept. Then take one bottle. After all, you're my partner, aren't you? Besides, during today's potions class, I didn't give you a chance to personally brew the potion. Anjuin forcefully shoved a potion bottle into Vivian's hands, making up a reason to comfort her. "Hat, you really know how to talk," Vivian said sarcastically, hearing Anjuin's heartless way of comforting her. "Oh, right, it's almost the weekend. Could you lend me your mahjong set? I have a few friends on the girls' side, and I was thinking of..." Vivian rubbed her fingers together, making a gesture of drawing tiles, looking at Anjuin with a smile. "This girl, why is she so quick to learn the bad stuff?" Anjuin glanced at Vivian speechlessly. He had been cooped up in his room lately, studying those spells. He barely saw Vivian a few times, except for classes and meals. After returning to the common room, Anjuin dug out the box of mahjong tiles that he hadn't touched in a long time, handed it to Vivian, and then returned to his room to continue his spell research. Anjuin summarized the first week of classes. The defense against the dark arts professor was a very unnoticeable professor, old and withered like a skeleton. During class, he basically just read from the textbook, which was very boring, and there was basically no practical content. It was said that the defense against the dark arts class at Hogwarts was cursed by Voldemort, and no professor could teach for a full year. Anjuin was worried when he took this class, afraid that the professor would kick the bucket at any moment. Anjuin was basically able to keep up with the progress of the Transfiguration class. He found that his Transfiguration talent was quite good. In the first class, Professor McGonagall asked them to turn a matchstick into a needle, and Anjuin perfectly completed it after more than half an hour of trying. For this, Professor McGonagall added 5 points to Slytherin. Although Anjuin also had a very high interest in Transfiguration, he still put the practice of Transfiguration behind him. After all, everyone's time is limited, and this kind of Transfiguration spell that requires a lot of practice can only be put on hold for now. Anjuin plans to spend time improving his Transfiguration spells after he has achieved some success in charms. Today's potions class made Anjuin realize one thing, that this subject was very suitable for him. He could master the making of potions in a very short period of time. Anjuin plans to put the study and making of potions on the agenda, focusing on mastering more potion recipes, and he already has some ideas. Anjuin plans to earn income in the future by selling potions. Gringotts can only exchange a maximum of 100 galleons, and it is not possible to exchange them every year, but only this much in total. He is not prepared to sit idly by and do nothing. Sirius Black's money was not taken for nothing, it made him provoke 2 Death Eaters for nothing. As for the herbology, astronomy, and history of magic courses, Anjuin's basic goal is to ensure that he keeps up with the progress. Now, for Anjuin, the main focus is on charms and researching Lily's charm, for which he has also clearly distinguished the priorities and made detailed plans. The first step is to learn new spells through the old textbooks that Anjuin found in the charms classroom and the defense against the dark arts classroom. Currently, Anjuin is basically still in this stage, with the goal of learning all the mainstream spells from grades 1-7, with the prerequisite that he can cast the spells completely. He doesn't require to use them very skillfully, mainly to learn them first. Of course, Anjuin will skip some of the more difficult ones first, such as apparition, because if the spell fails, it can cause splitting. The second step is the practice and development of self-defense spells. This also requires selecting several suitable spells for targeted practice after the first step of learning new spells is completed, and constructing a corresponding tactical system. Anjuin divided all the spells into 4 levels: entry, mastery, instinct, and transcendence. The level of being able to basically release the corresponding spell belongs to the entry stage. Anjuin's first requirement for himself is to master most of the spells at the entry level. Being able to skillfully master the spell, being able to recite the spell quickly and accurately, and being able to cast the spell in harsh environments and conditions without making mistakes belongs to mastery. Anjuin calls the level of having integrated the corresponding spell and being able to cast it silently and wandlessly the instinct level. Anjuin's levitation charm and obstacle charm basically belong to this stage. The so-called transcendence is a realm that Anjuin envisioned. In Anjuin's vision, a transcendent level spell is based on integration and develops unique casting skills, or can exert power far beyond the original spell. Developing a transcendent level spell is no longer the original spell. In Anjuin's view, Vanessa's Severing Charm has the potential to be developed into a transcendent spell, but currently, in Anjuin's definition, Vanessa's level of Severing Charm is a little stronger than Mastery, but has not yet reached the instinct level, but if the casting skills are further developed, it has the potential to be transcendent. Anjuan is currently also thinking about whether he can further develop his obstacle charm and levitation charm and upgrade them to transcendent level spells, but so far Anjuan still has no clue. At the same time, while learning self-defense magic, he must also study Lily's charm and try to make some other alchemical items. Currently, Anjuan's idea is to practice several spells to at least the mastery level, and make some practical alchemical items to improve his strength, such as replicating the charm, and jointly build his tactical system. Anjuan has a very serious fear of insufficient firepower and hates his own safety being out of his control, so he studies new spells day and night. Then there are the research topics in Professor Flitwick's Charms Club. Anjuan plans to start researching after learning most of the spells, except for the research on silent spells, wandless casting, and magic sensitivity. He can achieve silent spells and wandless casting through high-intensity training on a single spell. He actually knows how to improve magic sensitivity. Anjuan concluded that there are three main elements related to magic and spells, namely magic reserve, magic intensity, and magic sensitivity.